Chapter 546. So who was the mastermind behind tonight's show? Just as she was thinking about this question, Jingwon also asked. Does a Yuan have any suspects? There is. If the guess is true, then things may be very interesting. Interesting? A lot of people died. What was there to be interesting about? Or was it that interesting in someone's mouth was different from the understanding of ordinary people? Compared to his usual behavior, it seemed that the latter was more likely. Jingwon felt that she should prepare to light a candle for someone. Let's not mention this matter for the time being. If Imperial concubine Su makes a comeback, she definitely won't be content with her lot. I don't know what will happen. After being targeted by Imperial concubine Su many times, even though she didn't succeed every time and she herself was unharmed, Jingwon still felt quite annoyed. That was a mask that had been worn for a long time and suppressed for a long time. Once it broke out, it became distorted and perverted. The bargaining chips in Su Shi's hands are basically gone. In the end, she is just trapped in the harem and can't make any waves. Li Hongming went down once, and at least half of the people who were optimistic about him left. At this time, even if those people turned back, Li Hongming would disregard former enmity and be willing to accept them again. However, there is a phrase called settling accounts at an opportune time. Those people are not stupid. How could they not think of this point? So even if they feel that they miscalculated and walked the wrong way, they will still grit their teeth and continue walking. Moreover, they will do everything possible to help their new master and completely kill Li Hongming. No one will like a traitor. We don't have to do anything. After a period of time, Li Hongming will still be in a terrible fix. So to say, this mother and son pair, even if they climbed up again, in fact they were far from the original threat. The head eunuch by Lu Qingdi's side returned not long after. This time when he faced Li Hongyuan, he seemed even more apprehensive. He stammered and couldn't express himself clearly for a long time. After all, at that time, Jin Qinhuang and Gui Feinyang had completely broken off their relationship. Therefore, now that Gui Feinyang wanted to see Jin Qinhuang, if by any chance she angered Jin Qinhuang, the person who passed on the message would be angered and killed on the spot by Jin Qinhuang. Therefore he really didn't dare to say it. Why did such a chore always fall on his head? Clearly there were other people by the emperor's side. Sitting in the manager's position and being deeply trusted, shouldn't he be enjoying limitless glory? He was probably the most miserable chief steward in history. It was said that accompanying a monarch was like accompanying a tiger. This master was not a monarch, but he was even more terrifying than one. At this moment, the head eunuch inexplicably admired the colleague who had always been by Jin Qinhuang's side. That was a truly capable person. After so many years he could still live well. He was clearly the emperor's personal manager, but when facing him he couldn't hold it up. Therefore shouldn't he not care about these things and instead learn from him? Li Hongyuan tried his best to restrain his temper. However, the path he had chosen made him even more arrogant and reckless. Therefore he had to endure when it came to important matters. Apart from that, he gave all his patience and good temper to Jingwon. Because Lu Qingdi's chief steward had made him wait for a long time, the teacup had already landed accurately on his head. He screamed, but that sound was swallowed back in a very short time. The hand that subconsciously covered his forehead also quickly moved away. Above his eyes there was a bloody handprint. Blood was still flowing out, quickly blurring his vision. His body couldn't stop trembling slightly because of pain and also because of fear. At this time he didn't dare to hesitate anymore. Like pouring beans, he explained the matter clearly without panting. Li Hongyuan was expressionless. What does Su Shi think Ben Wang is? A kitten or puppy that she can call to come and go as she pleases. Ben Wang and her have already been written off. You bring these words back for Ben Wang. If anyone dares to come again for this matter, I will definitely make sure that they won't be able to return. Li Hongyuan fiercely slammed the small square table at his hand. The square table directly split into pieces. In the end, the head eunuch only had one eye covered. Seeing this, he rejoiced. His legs trembled even more. If this palm hit his body, he reckoned that his little life would be gone. Yes, newbie will withdraw. Compared to a living king of hell, he was even more willing to face the emperor's anger. In the Jade Essence Palace, which was originally bleak, now seemed to have recovered its former liveliness. However, Imperial concubine Su was lying on the bed, her breath hanging by a thread. That knife had directly pierced into her heart, and because of the poison the blood couldn't be stopped. She used a white cloth to tightly press it down, staining it red one after another. The head eunuch came back to report. Imperial concubine Su might have heard a sound, so she tried her best to open her eyes. Her consciousness was a little blurry. After looking for a while, she couldn't find the figure she was looking for. The tears in the corners of her eyes suddenly rolled down. Your Majesty, Yuan, is he really not willing to see me again, even if it's the last time? No, Yuan is a good child, a filial child. Shen will send someone else. Imperial concubine Su smiled bitterly. Yes, Yuan is a good child. It's me who has let him down. It's all my fault. It seemed that speaking was consuming her vitality, so Imperial concubine Su's face became more and more pale. But I'm just jealous. I clearly love your Majesty so much, your Majesty, but your Majesty only has my sister in his heart. I want to treat Yuan wholeheartedly, but he looks more and more like my sister. This concubine's heart is like being eaten by thousands of ants and insects, like being fried by a raging fire. It's like this every day and night. I keep telling myself that Yuan is innocent, he's the only one my sister left for your Majesty, so I can't. Imperial concubine Su opened her heart. At this moment she no longer concealed her ugly heart. However, all men had bad natures. No matter how ugly a woman's heart was, if everything was based on her true feelings for him, then their vanity would be greatly satisfied. In this way, it seemed that no matter how big a mistake this woman had made, she could be forgiven. Luqingdi was almost in such a state now. He had completely forgotten about the imperial concubine. What's more, as the saying goes, a dying man speaks the truth. Imperial concubine Su still took the knife for him. Luqingdi couldn't help but tremble at the thought of this injury on his body. Looking at this injury, she must have risked her life. Therefore, at this moment, whatever Imperial concubine Su said was the truth. He only needed to nod and say, okay. However, Imperial concubine Su was obviously a smart person. She wouldn't ask for anything at this time. Even if she really couldn't escape this disaster, she would never ask for anything. What she asked for would erase the kindness. What she wanted was for Luqingdi to give it to her willingly. What she asked for might only be one or two things, but what the emperor gave on his own initiative might be unlimited. In order to turn things around, Imperial concubine Su really gambled with her life. Rather than being humiliated and waiting to die in the Jade Essence Palace, it was better to die while being remembered by the emperor. Just like that bitch Peishur, Imperial concubine Su was certain that if she was still alive, the emperor would not have treasured her as much as he did in the beginning. If she had been used properly, perhaps her relationship with the emperor would have dropped to the freezing point long ago. However, she died at that moment and left the deepest mark in the emperor's heart. So much so that the emperor still could not forget her even after dozens of years and endlessly doted on the bitch she left behind. It was a pity that Imperial concubine Su realized this a little late. Otherwise, she wouldn't have schemed so ruthlessly in the morning. At least she wouldn't have let that bastard die. Now she grasped this point and gambled with her life. It would be best if he could survive, but if he couldn't, her son shouldn't have any problems in the future. After going through all the previous things, she believed that her son's temperament would become more mature and cautious. He wouldn't make mistakes easily and wouldn't be caught by others. The throne was within reach. Your Majesty, this concubine knows that Yuan will definitely not want to see this concubine again. Your Majesty, there's no need to force him. This concubine is just regretful that I lost my mind and vented my anger on him. Yuan is clearly the most pitiful and the most innocent. He doesn't want to see this concubine and doesn't want to forgive this concubine. It's right. As Imperial concubine Su spoke, her voice became weaker and weaker as if she couldn't continue speaking. This concubine will personally bring that bastard here. There were many reasons why Luqingdi doted on Imperial concubine Su for so many years, but there was still some affection in it. After all, Imperial concubine Su was a woman who could attract many men in all aspects. It was just that Imperial concubine Su stepped on Luqingdi's reverse scale, so he hated her. Once she grasped Luqingdi's mind, it wouldn't be difficult for her to get back. Luqingdi was a person who cherished old relationships. It was just that the Imperial concubine was too special to him, so it didn't show on others. Imperial concubine Su pulled Luqingdi's sleeve. She could have brushed it away with a light flick, but Luqingdi didn't dare to use force. No, Your Majesty, don't go. If this concubine dies, Yuan will still hate me. Did Imperial concubine Su want to see Li Hongyuan? Of course not. If the adopted son whom she finally realized she didn't know anything about really came, the situation she created would be destroyed. She was sure that Li Hongyuan wouldn't see her, so she put on such a show. Obviously she wanted to see him very much. Now she had to bear the pain of not seeing him. She created a more stable image for herself, and at the same time she discredited that bastard. Okay, I'll do as you say. Don't talk anymore. Imperial concubine Su closed her eyes as if she would never wake up. Luqingdi was all kinds of anxious. The imperial physicians were still trying their best to save her, but they couldn't determine what kind of poison it was. They could only use the most conventional methods, which were obviously ineffective. Seeing that the blood was still flowing, Luqingdi cursed the quack doctor and kicked him away. He almost ordered people to drag him out and behead him. Li Hongming entered the palace very quickly. He was one step behind Gongjiu, but he arrived at the Jade Essence Palace before Gongjiu. Because he was worried about his mother, he didn't care about anything else and rushed into the palace. After entering the palace, he didn't even get off the horse, which seemed to be understandable. Mother. Li Hongming ran in a hurry, completely disregarding his manners. He seemed to only have Imperial concubine Su in his heart. He threw himself to Imperial concubine Su's side, even ignoring Luqingdi. Mother, how are you? He reached out his hand carefully as if he wanted to touch her, but he didn't dare to. He was afraid that the slightest touch would hurt her. Mother, it's your son. Look at me, okay? Mother. The man's tears also rolled down in an instant. It was said that men didn't cry easily, let alone a prince. But at this time no one would blame him. Luqingdi looked at him and felt incomparably bitter. This was the woman he once doted on, the son he was most optimistic about. Luqingdi couldn't help but reach out and pat him on the shoulder. Your mother will be fine. Imperial father. Li Hongming's lips trembled as if he just noticed Luqingdi. Your son was rude just now. What time is it now? Why do you still care about manners? Ming'er. Imperial concubine Su called out in a low voice. She wanted to open her eyes, but her eyelids were like 1,000 gold. Your Majesty, this concubine seems to have heard Ming'er's voice. Mother, it's your son. I'm coming. Li Hongming grabbed Imperial concubine Su. Imperial concubine Su struggled to open her eyes. Before I die, I can see you one last time, mother. Mother, don't talk nonsense. You'll be fine. Imperial physician, why don't I see the imperial physician? Imperial father, what did the imperial physician say? What did he say? Why can't I see anyone? Li Hongming shouted hysterically. Because talking to Luqingdi was like shouting at him. Luqingdi didn't mind at this time. There's poison on the weapon. Ordinary detoxification methods won't work. The imperial physician is investigating what kind of poison it is. It's only possible to prescribe the right medicine. Li Hongming swallowed back the words he wanted to say. He clenched his teeth and the veins on his forehead bulged. Your Majesty, Jin Qin Wang Fu's physician has arrived. The palace servant outside hurriedly reported. Why haven't you called him in yet? Luqingdi and Li Hongming spoke at the same time. Gong Jiu strode in and was about to salute, but Li Hongming grabbed him and pulled him over with all his strength. Quickly save my mother. There were still traces of tears on his face. Gong Jiu subconsciously wanted to shake off Li Hongming. If he really did that, it would be easy to do. In the end, he restrained himself. Gong Jiu took Imperial concubine Su's pulse, asking Your Majesty to move. This person is about to die. You guys aren't physicians. What's the use of surrounding her? At this time, Luqingdi was very obedient. His movements were also very smooth. Gong Jiu impolitely sat in Luqingdi's original position and spread out the needle case. There was a row of shining silver needles. His finger slid across it and then he took out one. Just as he was about to start, Gong Jiu suddenly paused. Your Majesty, Imperial concubine Yang has lost too much blood. Some of the blood has coagulated. To avoid causing an impact, we may need to touch Imperial concubine Yang's body. Men and women shouldn't touch each other. Even if the other party was an old woman, she was still the emperor's woman. So to prevent Luqingdi's possessiveness from causing mischief, it was best to make it clear in advance. In the eyes of a physician, isn't there only the patient and not the difference between men and women? Lu Qingdi was very righteous. He just didn't know if it was because, in any case, she was already so old. Even if she was cured, Zhen wouldn't sleep. So what if she was touched by another man? It's not like he was wearing a green hat. Thank you, Imperial Father. Li Hongming was really afraid that Lu Qingdi would give up on the treatment. Obviously, Lu Qingdi's IQ was also online at this time. In any case, he was the savior of Imperial concubine Yang Yang. If he didn't treat Imperial concubine Yang Yang because of this, it might be understood from a man's point of view. But from a reasonable point of view, it wouldn't be understood. After getting permission, Gong Jiu no longer hesitated. He tore Imperial concubine Su's clothes a little. It looked like a bloody mess and her skin couldn't be seen. Then his left hand felt around the wound and the silver needle in his right hand steadily fell. Looking at the current situation, it was obvious that the first step was to stop the bleeding. Otherwise, Imperial concubine Su might bleed to death before the detoxification. Gong Jiu's silver needle hemostasis technique could be said to be superb. With just a few needles, he easily did what a group of Imperial doctors couldn't do. Then Gong Jiu took out the prepared disinfectant alcohol, medical cotton, and tweezers from his medical box. Obviously, these things also came from Jingwan. It wasn't too difficult. Since she said it, Li Hongyuan's subordinates could naturally get it. Gong Jiu casually handed it to Li Hongming. Use this to clean Imperial concubine Su's wound. Remember not to touch the silver needle. Gong Jiu went to write a few prescriptions and explained it to Lu Qingdi's people. After that, he didn't ask any more questions. Imperial concubine Su's palace maid cleaned her wound, but it was obvious that she had never done such a thing before. Originally, she could hold the embroidery needle as if it was flying, but now she was clumsy, making people anxious. Moreover, Gong Jiu only stopped Imperial concubine Su's bleeding, but he didn't stop the pain. Once the alcohol was applied, the stinging pain caused Imperial concubine Su to groan in pain. Her face was so pale that there was no trace of blood. The palace maid's hands trembled even more, afraid that she had hurt her master. Gong Jiu could clearly relieve her pain. During the trauma surgery in the northwest, he didn't use silver needles to relieve pain. Obviously, it was because the other party didn't get along with her master. He was black-hearted and deliberately did it. He couldn't use other methods, so this was a small matter. What's going on? What is this? Imperial concubine mother wasn't like this just now. Li Hongming grabbed Gong Jiu's lapel and questioned him with an unkind expression. Gong Jiu rudely pried Li Hongming's hand away. Third prince, please calm down. This is to prevent Imperial concubine Su's wound from becoming red and swollen. It will only increase the pain. Other than that, there won't be any other effect. This is something that can't be helped. He explained indifferently. The way he addressed Li Hongming was purely out of disgust. Li Hongming's face was dark, but he couldn't say anything. He was reduced to a commoner and didn't have a noble title. Under normal circumstances, calling him a prince was already giving him face. The status of a prince was much more honorable than that of a commoner. It was just that Lu Qingdi didn't give an edict to remove his name from the imperial family. However, it was obvious that after Li Hongming fell down, he still hadn't learned his lesson. The thing that existed in his bones still hadn't been smoothed out. Otherwise, he should know that he shouldn't easily offend a doctor, especially one who was not under his control but had excellent medical skills. When he needed him, he could quietly kill you. However, there was a trace of doubt in Lu Qingdi's eyes. Imperial concubine Su has never been like this before. Replying to your majesty, Imperial concubine Su has been poisoned by a special kind of snake venom. At first, the wound will be numb and she won't feel any pain. Only after a period of time will this numbness disappear. Imperial concubine Su has obviously passed that time. This kind of pain is within the range of ordinary people, so your majesty doesn't need to worry. Lu Qingdi nodded and didn't speak anymore. Gong Jiu looked at her coldly. You'd better hurry up. Imperial concubine Su's current situation doesn't allow for any delay. Hearing this, the palace maid was also anxious. However, the more anxious she was, the more flustered she became. The more flustered she was, the more unstable her hands were. She almost spilled the wine. The palace maid was so scared that she knelt on the ground. Your Majesty, please forgive me. Your Highness, please forgive me. Lu Qingdi and Li Hongming's faces were gloomy. Scram, useless thing. Gong Jiu, it's better if you do it. Yes. He picked up a pair of tweezers, picked up a piece of cotton, dipped it in alcohol and directly rubbed it on Imperial concubine Su's wound. His movements were clean and nimble, but it was obvious that he wasn't gentle at all. He directly stuffed the cotton into the wound. Li Hongming saw that he was so crude and clenched his fists. "Unruly commoner, you have big guts. You actually dare to use underhanded methods." His fist swung out. In his view, Gong Jiu was a person of Jin Qin Wang Fu, so he didn't have good intentions. Gong Jiu dodged and expressionlessly looked at Li Hongming. "If you don't clean it up properly, the one who will suffer will only be Imperial concubine Su. How about Wang Ye do it himself?" He wasn't a real commoner, so how could Gong Jiu bow and bend his knees? Not only did he have a master behind him, he was also full of confidence. He didn't fear Li Hongming at all. "Lao San, wait quietly for Zhen. Don't cause trouble." After cleaning up, Gong Jiu carefully checked Imperial concubine Su's pulse. Her lungs were indeed injured. It wasn't serious, but it was enough to be fatal. Gong Jiu hadn't reached the stage where he could perform internal surgery. Whether Imperial concubine Su could survive or not would depend on her own good fortune. As for the poison, it was secondary. He knew what kind of poison it was and how to detoxify it. As long as he could detoxify it within the effective time, there was nothing to worry about. As for the truth, Gong Jiu also told Lu Qingdi the truth, so that he wouldn't have to take the blame if Imperial concubine Su died. Chapter 547. Gong Jiu also told Lu Qingdi the truth so that he wouldn't have to take the blame if noble consort Su died. "You have the ability to deliberately evade the responsibility, and now you're shirking the responsibility. You really are." "Third prince," Gong Jiu rudely interrupted him, "this commoner is only a human, not a god. This commoner only knows a little more than the imperial physicians. If third prince still insists that this commoner didn't do his duty, then this commoner will be responsible for detoxifying noble consort Su. As for the rest, third prince can find whoever he thinks has the ability." "Shameful thing you really are. I want your life, someone come. This commoner is just a commoner. I am indebted to Jin Qin Wang Yi for thinking highly of me, so I became the physician of Jin Qin Wang Fu. In the end, it's just a lowly life. Third prince wants it, just take it." Gong Jiu was not afraid at all. Lu Qingdi only felt a sudden pain in his temples. "Someone come, take Shen away for Prince Rui. Without permission no one is allowed to enter." But this address, he didn't know if it was a habit or if it had a special meaning. Li Hongming stiffly looked at Lu Qingdi. "Zhen will not pursue the matter because you are worried about your mother. Lao San, so many things have happened, don't speak so casually until now." Li Hongming's lips trembled, his face dejected as he wiped his face. "Fu Huang, this son was anxious and lost his sense of propriety. Just now I was reckless. Dr. Gong, please don't bicker with me. Please take care of Mu Fei." Li Hongming glanced at noble consort Su, who had already fallen into a coma. Perhaps it was useless for him to stand here and might even add to the chaos. After all, some thoughts were simply out of his control. Temporarily avoiding them might be the best policy. But those who were outstanding in certain aspects would always have some little eccentricities. Even Lu Qingdi's tolerance for these people was relatively high. Relatively speaking, Gong Jiu was just a little stubborn. Lu Qingdi naturally couldn't bear to part with such a talent. Perhaps Lu Qingdi wanted to express his trust in Gong Jiu, so he directly handed noble consort Su to him and said that as long as Gong Jiu tried his best, he wouldn't do anything even if noble consort Su died. He would deal with the aftermath himself. At the end of the day, Lu Qingdi was still selfish. Although Imperial concubine Su had saved his life, it was still far from enough compared to him. After Imperial concubine Su was grounded, more than half of the people who used to serve her in the palace were beaten to death. She lost her original lofty status, and it was impossible for the Ministry of Internal Affairs to replace her. Now that Emperor Lu Qingdi left with his people, the Jade Palace became lonely and desolate again. The people who served Imperial concubine Su now were only a few palace maids and eunuchs, who were not alert and capable enough. Gong Jiu watched silently. He was about to stand up again, but no one took the initiative to curry favor. This was good too. Gong Jiu's treatment after that was very casual. To a large extent, it depended on Imperial concubine Su's luck. It didn't matter if she could live. Imperial concubine Su's body had suffered quite a bit of damage and was rapidly deteriorating. This time she had lost too much blood and the effects were even more serious. Even if she could barely make it through, she would probably have to accompany the Empress. If she died directly, it might be too easy for her. Of course, Gongju wouldn't go all out just because of this. Leaving the Jade Palace, Emperor Luqingdi's worry about imperial concubine Su weakened a little, and he paid more attention to tonight's matter. There were so many assassins in the palace and he almost fell for it. How could he not be angry? Leading a large group of people, he angrily rushed to the imperial garden. The scene had already been cleaned up, but after knowing how many of his children and grandchildren had suffered, his eyes darkened and he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. However, compared to Heartache, Emperor Luqingdi was more angry. Where is Yu Zhongqing? Where did he die? Fu Huang, Commander Yu was seriously injured in the process of killing the assassins. He was also poisoned. Now he won't make it. Emperor Luqingdi was startled. For a moment he didn't know how to react. It was as if he had clearly forgotten everything that Yu Zhongqing had done, felt that he was too incompetent, and wanted to vent all his anger on him. Now that he knew that the other's life was in danger, he was like a deflated ball, remembering his loyal past. Immediately send him to the Jade Palace and let the doctor of Jin Qingwang Fu take a look. Then Emperor Luqingdi seemed to have thought of something. What about you? Is there anyone injured or poisoned? Go to the Jade Palace together and see if it is the same poison. If it is, then cure it together. If there was a way to cure the poison but they didn't have time to cure it and died, then it really was. And when Emperor Luqingdi learned that these adult sons of his, except for old Seven's arm, were all unharmed, his mood became a little subtle. What Qin Shufei saw he naturally also saw some. As a father, as a husband, in a critical moment he didn't protect his wife and children, but instead pushed them out. Those children who died, how many of them died because of their actions? People to seek benefits and avoid harm, this seemed to be their nature. But to really do so, how selfish and cold was that? If it was him, the father, would they also do the same? When he thought of this possibility, Emperor Luqingdi's face turned completely black. Without saying anything, he scolded them to their faces. According to Qin Shufei, it seemed to be to assassinate Luqingdi and the princes. The final result looked very tragic. Luqingdi was fine and the princes were also fine. After killing so many people, it seemed to be purely killing people on sight. Those who ran fast were fine and those who ran slow deserved it. It shouldn't be like this. Then looking at it from another point of view, whoever lost in this assassination would benefit. The matter was very clear. The only person who benefited was imperial concubine Su. Although she saw that she had sacrificed herself, and it didn't seem like she was resting, the world didn't lack people who would gamble with their lives. If you want to achieve great things, you have to be more ruthless than others. When necessary, you have to be even more ruthless to yourself. Then the problem returned to the original point. According to Li Hongyuan's understanding, with the current power of the Su family and Li Hongming, they wouldn't be able to carry out tonight's assassination. It wasn't that they didn't have a way to get people into the palace, but that they didn't have such well-trained assassins. Even if they had the Minister of Personnel, Lord Su, whom Li Hongyuan didn't have any impression of in his previous life, secretly helping them, it was unlikely that they could achieve this step. Obviously, there were still things he didn't know. Regarding this, Li Hongyuan wasn't vexed. Although he had the ability of clairvoyance and held an advantage, the things he knew were limited after all. Moreover, due to the long period of time, it was normal for him to be negligent and forget. Thinking about it, Li Hongyuan entered a semi-hazy state until someone knocked on the door outside. Li Hongyuan opened his eyes. Wanwan, wake up. Now he was worried about leaving Jingwan here alone. What's wrong? Jingwan was still sleepy and in a daze. There should be something outside. I just remembered. After that, we'll go back to the prince's mansion to sleep. Oh. Jingwan obviously hadn't woken up yet and was a little dazed. Li Hongyuan asked someone to fetch warm water for her to wash up a little and wake up. When Sister Hei and Mammy Gong served Jingwan, Li Hongyuan learned about the situation from eunuch Mu. Luqingdi mobilized all the men of the blackguard to replace the imperial guards, besieged the imperial kitchen and the musical house, and arrested and detained all the people inside. The imperial guards were also guarded. Then a large-scale search was carried out and those who were close to the assassins were basically unlucky. Later during the search they found many corpses. Only then did they realize that they were people who had been replaced by assassins. When they turned back to look at those assassins, it turned out that they were all in disguise. Their technique was actually not very good. As long as they got along with people for a long time, their acquaintances would be able to tell that something was wrong. Therefore, these people took advantage of the time and took advantage of the fact that people in several places were busy tonight to take advantage of the time. Where these people came from and how did they enter the palace? There was no way to find out. There were no suspicious places found at all the gates of the palace. Of course, if they said that they didn't find anything, they were shirking the responsibility. It was not the first time that something happened in the palace. The emperor's birthday the year before last was also left unsettled. Lu Qingdi didn't believe it. He gave Li Xian a strict order to investigate to the end. If there was anything suspicious, they were all taken back to the prison of the blackguard for interrogation. In this way, when Lu Qingdi arrived at the Sweet Dew Palace, it was almost 4 hours later. As an emperor, he was suspicious by nature. Although he didn't suspect Li Hongyuan, Lu Qingdi still asked a few questions instinctively. Li Hongyuan's face was cold. He was very cooperative, but his expression was too sarcastic. The fact that Lu Qingdi could still stand properly was a testament to his tolerance. But now he was being mocked by his son. No matter how high his tolerance was, he couldn't help but fly into a rage. Li Hongyuan didn't budge at all. In the end, Qin Shufei and Jingwan had to work together to stop the war between the father and son. In the end, "Get out of here," Lu Qingdi pointed outside. Li Hongyuan couldn't ask for more. He took Jingwan and quickly left. Seeing him so straightforward, Lu Qingdi's anger rose sharply. Previously I said so much but he didn't listen. Now he seems very obedient. He was waiting for me here, right? Oh, this evil creature. Your Majesty, please calm down. Qin Shufei gently stroked his chest to help him calm down. It's not like Your Majesty doesn't know that His Highness has such a temper since he was young. He can't bear any grievances. Tonight it was just a coincidence that the couple left the banquet. Your Majesty didn't suspect anything. But now that you asked, he's definitely unhappy. Moreover, His Highness seems to be angry with Your Majesty. This concubine doesn't know why, but with these two things added together, he's going all out against you. His Highness is a straightforward person. Everything is on the surface, but there's no twists and turns in his heart. After being comforted by Qin Shufei's soft words, Lu Qingdi's anger dissipated a lot. Thinking about his evil creature son since he was young, when was he as obedient as his other sons? He was already used to it. If he suddenly became very obedient, he would be worried. So in the end he could only sigh helplessly. Qin Shufei didn't ask anything. She just waited on Lu Qingdi to sleep with the palace servants. After Lu Qingdi fell asleep, Qin Shufei dismissed the palace servants. She sat quietly on the edge of the bed and looked at Lu Qingdi. The other party was frowning. Obviously he didn't sleep well. Qin Shufei's expression didn't change, but her eyes didn't have the previous warmth. She was still a peaceful and beautiful person but with a bit of coldness. Qin Shufei sat for a while. She stood up and walked to the window. She looked up at the full moon in the sky. It should have been a family reunion and a day of celebration, but such a tragedy happened. She didn't know how many people died and how many were injured. She didn't even dare to ask. It should be the happiest time in an ordinary family. But in the imperial palace, the more it was like this, the more likely it was to cause all kinds of trouble. If it was light, there would be hidden mockery. If it was serious, there would be all kinds of framing. Moreover, because of this, the people with the most noble status were gathered together. So, Qin Shufei actually disliked all kinds of festivities. The more beautiful it was, the more tragic it would be after something happened. Because of his relationship with Gongjiu, Li Hongyuan knew more than Lu Qingdi. Although Gongjiu was still in the Jade Essence Palace, he always had a way to bring the news out. For example, after the detoxification, Yu Zhongqing didn't even frown when the wound extended from his shoulder blade to the back of his waist. Li Hongyuan looked at the 2-finger-wide note. The snake venom came from a special kind of poisonous snake in the territory of the former Wei? Former Wei. Li Hongyuan murmured these 2 words. This gave him a good direction. For Li Hongyuan this was a good clue. However, when Lu Qingdi knew about this, Wei Xianfei would be in trouble. Even if she knew that this matter was unlikely to be her doing, Wei Xianfei was trapped in Qiyuan Imperial Palace, and the only people she could trust were the maids who had served her before. She was absolutely isolated from the outside world. However, who asked her to be the princess of the former Wei? Now that there was an assassination at the Mid-Autumn Festival, There were clues pointing to the former Wei. Therefore, when Wei Xianfei was bored and was dressing up in front of the mirror, Lu Qingdi angrily rushed in, grabbed Wei Xianfei and slapped her. Wei Xianfei turned over and hit the dressing table. Coincidentally, the tip of a hairpin was pointed at her flesh, while the other side was against the makeup box. The tip of the hairpin pierced directly into her flesh. Wei Xianfei's originally delicate skin and tender flesh was so painful that her face almost twisted. However, after being in the imperial palace of Qiyuan for almost 2 years, Wei Xianfei's pride was almost worn out. Therefore, even if she was angry, she didn't dare to show it. "Your Majesty, what did I do wrong? Why are you so angry?" She was very pitiful. "The poison on the weapon of the assassin last night came from the former Wei. What do you want to say?" Lu Qingdi grabbed her neck and asked gloomily. Wei Xianfei was alarmed. "Your Majesty, this concubine doesn't know. I really don't know. Ever since I entered Qiyuan Imperial Palace and became your Majesty's concubine, everything about this concubine is under your Majesty's eyes. How could I do anything? Moreover, since this concubine is your Majesty's concubine, then even if Qiyuan and the former Wei had a war, this concubine would definitely stand on Qiyuan's side. Your Majesty, you have to believe this concubine, Your Majesty." Lu Qingdi's face was still gloomy and cold. At this moment, the little prince in the cradle suddenly cried. Lu Qingdi was startled and his hand unconsciously loosened a little. Wei Xianfei's eyes flashed and she saw the hope of escaping this disaster. "Emperor, for the sake of our child, can you believe this concubine? This matter really has nothing to do with me. I'm your woman when I'm alive and my soul belongs to the Qiyuan when I die. I will never be disloyal." Lu Qingdi glanced at the cradle. It was his youngest son. His heart was moved and he threw Wei Xianfei away. "This matter had better have nothing to do with you. Otherwise, when I find out, I'll skin you alive." Wei Xianfei fell to the ground and didn't get up for a long time. At that time she refused to go to the Xiongnu for peace and stayed in the Qiyuan. She thought that at least there was a life of luxury here. Look, this was her life of luxury. She was clearly the legitimate princess of the Wei dynasty. He grew up being pampered. If she stayed in the Wei dynasty and got a husband, she would still be surrounded by attendants. The palace servant stood at the door with a cold expression, as if he didn't see Wei Xianfei's embarrassment. This was the current situation of the Yi Palace. It was also the coldest and most ruthless reality. There was no support, no favor, and anyone could step on her head. Wei Xianfei had been angry before, but she was only ridiculed in return. The appearance of an assassin at the Mid-Autumn Festival was a big matter. It wouldn't be hidden and it couldn't be hidden. Those who were well informed got the news last night. Today almost everyone knew. The first reaction of the officials was to wonder who was so audacious. Some people might whisper that imperial concubine Su was lucky. She happened to come across the merit of saving the emperor and was able to turn the situation around. More people thought that it was a conspiracy theory. The simplest way of thinking was that whoever benefited was the mastermind. However, this kind of thing couldn't be said easily. There was no evidence and it might anger the emperor. Therefore, the key now was to find out the truth of this matter. It was best for those who had nothing to do with it to be a bystander and not to interfere. Chapter 548. As for what happened at the Mid-Autumn Festival Palace banquet, only a small number of people were affected. The others continued to live their lives as usual. It was just one more topic to talk about. After all, it involved the royal family and more than one member of the royal family had died. When discussing this matter, it was relatively obscure. With just a few words, it didn't stir up as much waves as most of the gossip. Of course, it looked calm on the surface, but if this matter was related to some official, then there would be a bloody storm after the investigation. At that time, the panic would spread over the capital for at least 3 months. Not many people would be able to ignore the matter as if it had nothing to do with them like it did now. Well, the premise was that it could be investigated. What if it couldn't be investigated? The matter was done so meticulously. Whether the assassin completed the task or not, he would die. Therefore, it was more likely that it couldn't be investigated. However, there were no absolutes in the world. There might be a twist at any time. In the palace, imperial concubine Su was tenacious. Gong Jiu only treated her according to the usual methods and didn't do his best. He survived. Perhaps there was too much hatred and unwillingness in her heart. Her desire to live was too strong. On the night of the Mid-Autumn Festival, the former Princess Rue, Lady Lu, also followed into the palace. She brought her 3 daughters with her. Princess Haeyong found her grandson. Although all the trouble was caused by the father of the baby girl in her hands, the child was innocent. Princess Haeyong wasn't a psychopath. She returned the child safe and sound. Now Lady Lu kept a close watch on the 3 children. At home, no matter how angry Li Hongming was at her, she was indifferent. To put it bluntly, she was a typical case of a dead pig not afraid of boiling water. However, if Li Hongming tried to touch her children, just wanted to get close to them, Lady Lu would go crazy in seconds. She would fight with Li Hongming like a mad dog. Having seen this more than once, Li Hongming's face was so dark that ink could drip out. However, he had no power and influence. Lady Lu's father was still an elder of the inner pavilion. He still wanted to rise up and he still wanted the Lu family's help. Therefore he couldn't do anything to Lady Lu. However, Li Hongming had never been a magnanimous person. If he really ascended the throne, Lady Lu would definitely not have a good end. Lady Lu took care of noble consort Su. If it was in the past, she would probably do it herself. But now she just sat there like a wooden stake. She didn't even move her mouth, let alone move her hands. Not to mention that the Jade Essence Palace was fully staffed now and the rewards from Emperor Lu Qing were flowing like water. Even if it was just a miserable situation before, Lady Lu wouldn't help. It was almost time, so she went to see the children. Although noble consort Su was injured and not sick, and Lady Lu rarely let the children appear in front of noble consort Su, when the children were around, Lady Lu was obviously much gentler and angry. Noble consort Su was so angry that her heart, liver and lungs hurt. However, being angry could only increase the burden on her body. She could only suppress her anger. She used to be satisfied with Lady Lu, but now she was as dissatisfied with Lady Lu as she was with Jingwan. However, Lady Lu was stubborn now. Similarly, if anyone dared to use her children, she would still dare to make a scene in the palace. Therefore, in the end, noble consort Su could only be like Li Hongming. Lady Lu saw this and sneered in her heart. In the past, she was too stupid and had too many misgivings. That was why she was tightly controlled in the palm of their hands. Now, even if she knew that she might be at the end of the road, she didn't care. First, she would let herself be happy. When the time came, she would just take the 3 children with her. In any case, if she died, the 3 children definitely wouldn't have a good life. Although she was reluctant, she had no other choice because Lady Lu was very clear that even if she lowered herself like before, she wouldn't have a good life in the future. Besides, Lady Lu felt that she might not be at the end of the road. As long as Li Hongming couldn't sit on the throne, the 4 of them still had a good chance of survival. The new emperor would deal with Li Hongming and wouldn't touch them. Firstly, it would show the new emperor's benevolence. Secondly, her 3 children were all girls and wouldn't pose a threat to the new emperor. On the surface, Lady Lu tried her best to set up a protective wall for the children, but in her heart she kept thinking about how to find a way out for them. It would be great if she could gain the favor of the new emperor first and get a protective talisman for them. That's right. Now, as long as she could exchange the safety of the 4 of them, Lady Lu wouldn't hesitate to betray Li Hongming. Unfortunately, she counted her fingers and thought over and over again, but she didn't think that any of them had a high chance of becoming the emperor. The emperor clearly had so many sons and it seemed that they all had some ability, but they weren't outstanding. She used to think highly of Li Hongming, but he failed miserably time and time again. He was the first to fall. It was obvious that he was useless. It was this kind of situation that was the most difficult to bet on. However, this kind of thing was different from other things. She couldn't cast the net too widely. Otherwise, if she was careless, she could lose her life in advance. If Li Hongming found out, he could kill her directly without caring about anything else. Princess Lu looked more and more like a lifeless wooden stake, but she was very anxious in her heart. Li Hongyuan made it clear to Lu Qingdi that he didn't care if Lu Qingdi suspected him or stripped him of his title. He didn't have time to explain or pay attention to anyone. However, Lu Qingdi fell for this trick. It was said that once a person's heart was biased, he would see everything with a filter. Li Hongyuan grew up as a scoundrel. In Lu Qingdi's eyes, he was a straightforward and well-behaved child. Once the first impression was the strongest, Lu Qingdi would definitely be unhappy when other princes slandered Li Hongyuan. Not to mention on the night of the Mid-Autumn Festival, Luqingdi was quite disappointed with their performance. So they didn't dare to pretend to be pitiful by losing a child to gain sympathy. If they really dared to do so, Li Hongyuan wouldn't do anything to them, but they would suffer. In the end, those who still wanted to put the blame on Li Hongyuan were stopped by Luqingdi's unfilial and unfilial. They didn't dare to say more. Originally, many people were worried about Li Hongyuan. However, he didn't do anything and Luqingdi had full power to uphold justice for him. While they were worried for nothing. The power of bias was really extraordinary. As for those who didn't like Li Hongyuan, they could only stomp their feet in anger once again. Jin Qinhuang's position in the emperor's heart is unshakable. Even if it is shaken, those who want to kill him will be consigned to eternal damnation even faster. Rather than saying that the emperor is biased towards Jin Qinhuang, it's better to say that the emperor is protecting the other princes to a certain extent. Now it's just that the emperor is still holding up and Jin Qinhuang is too lazy to move. If the estimation is correct, Jin Qinhuang's wings are full, his claws and teeth are sharp, and he can brazenly attack at any time. For some things, as long as you pull out a thread, you can pull out a longer thread. Although it was just the tip of the iceberg, it was enough to frighten people. To deal with a person like Jin Qinhuang, one couldn't act blindly without thinking. If one moved, one must hit with one blow. Otherwise, one could be gnawed until not even bones were left. Therefore, one must be patient, cautious, and thorough. Sun Yilin spent the Mid-Autumn Festival with the Luo family in the Luo family. It could be considered as experiencing the happy atmosphere of family harmony. However, that kind of happy mood couldn't be maintained for too long. Because after all, the Luo family wasn't his home. Tidying up the few things he had, he prepared to leave the capital. Just at this time, someone came to the Luo family's door. Moreover, it was a girl and she specifically asked to see Sun Yilin. Sun Yilin was originally playing chess with Luo Jinghua, and Sun Yijia was watching from the side. Hearing the news from the door guard, Sun Yijia looked at her elder brother with astonishment and ridicule. Her fifth brother owed a romantic debt outside. His eyes turned and it looked like he was about to roll his eyes. Sun Yijia snorted and laughed out loud. She hurriedly covered her mouth with her handkerchief and then acted as if nothing had happened. She didn't do anything. Please ignore her. You can continue. Luo Jinghua was also drinking tea at this time. The husband and wife had a tacit understanding. Their eyes met through the edge of the quilt and they smiled tacitly. But surnamed Min? Was she a girl from the Min family? Sun Yilin glanced at them and didn't say anything. Is this the main point? Min Xiaoyuan also looked at Sun Yilin and Luo Jinghua. If she guessed correctly, they should be Sun Yilin's younger sister and brother-in-law. She had already asked around about Sun Yilin. But if he didn't introduce her, she couldn't just run up to them. Moreover, her main point now was to make Sun Yilin let her stay. Then what's the main point? Didn't you say that I didn't bring enough people? Min Xiaoyuan revealed a sense of naivety and doubt. Sun Yilin was a little discouraged. Obviously, this wasn't the first time this happened. You shouldn't have come to the capital. When Min Xiaoyuan heard this, the rims of her eyes became a little red. Her hand that was tugging at her handkerchief was a little pale. Sun Yilin reflected on himself if he was too straightforward. However, there were some things that he couldn't do and couldn't promise, so he shouldn't drag it out. However, this girl seemed to have a one-track mind. It wasn't the first time he had rejected her so straightforwardly, but he didn't see any signs of her backing down. Miss Min, chasing after a man without telling your family is not something a lady from a respectable family should do. Not only will your family be worried, but if others find out, not only you but your parents and elders will also be pointed at. Your sister's reputation will also be tarnished because of your actions. Whether you're selfish or willful, you shouldn't. Young master Sun. The old servant behind Min Xiaoyuan finally couldn't listen to it anymore. Sun Yilin glanced at her coldly and continued to speak, ignoring Min Xiaoyuan's pitter-patter of tears. I've told you long ago that it's impossible between us. Not to mention that I'm all alone now with no official position, title, or property. How can I afford to raise a pampered girl like you? Even I have never thought of marrying. So go back to where you came from. Don't cause trouble for others, do you understand? This was the first time Sun Yijia heard her elder brother speak so bluntly. It was too much to say this to a girl. Moreover, this girl didn't seem to be thick-skinned. The fact that she followed him to the capital was probably the most outrageous thing she could do. Even if she wanted to reject him, she should at least be more tactful. Fifth brother, little sister, this is my business. Don't butt in. Just mind your own business. Sun Yilin tilted his head and said coldly. Sun Yijia was obviously angered by him this time. She put down the cup in her hand on the table. Fine, I don't care. Do whatever you want. This time Luo Jingbo had a headache. Pregnant women had a strange temper. It was fine if his wife wasn't angry, but once she got angry he might not be able to coax her back even if he tried his best. Brother-in-law, you shouldn't trick me like this. Min Xiaoyuan wiped her tears. I've disturbed you today, young master. I'll leave now. As she spoke, she left directly. She was very straightforward, but her whole person exuded a sense of stubbornness. Young miss. Min Xiaoyuan's servant called out worriedly. Sco. Why are you staying here? You'll be annoying. Min Xiaoyuan quickened her steps. Min Xiaoyuan's behavior was surprising. She chased after him from so far away, but she gave up so easily. Only Sun Yilin felt his head hurt even more. Little sister, send someone to find out where they're staying. They're new to the capital and will be easily bullied. Fifth brother, didn't you tell me to stay out of your business? Why are you looking for me? Sun Yijia said coldly. Little sister. Sun Yilin said helplessly, this girl was born in the Min family. Her grandfather and the head of the Min family are cousins. Their family is doing well. She's the daughter of the main wife, so she should have a good marriage of equal status. She shouldn't be involved with me. I don't know my future and I don't want to get married. Don't you understand? Fifth brother, when did you meet her? 2 years ago. Although Sun Yilin didn't know why, he still answered truthfully. Do you know how old she is now? Sun Yilin's face stiffened. 18. Sun Yijia sneered. Obviously you've already delayed her. We're all from aristocratic families. You know very well what aristocratic families are like. When you met her she was already 16. What do you think the chances of her not being engaged are? The fact that she's still with you now means that her marriage is obviously over. Not many men in aristocratic families can decide their own marriages, let alone a girl. It takes a lot of courage and determination to fight against her own marriage. If she doesn't do well, her family would rather kill her. The fact that she's still standing in front of you, other than the fact that her parents should be kind and doting on her, she's definitely sacrificed a lot herself. However, she's still full of vitality, which means that she has no regrets about her sacrifice. She may be rebellious, but she dares to pursue her goals. Even if you reject her, at least you shouldn't use words to hurt her. Everyone can criticize her, but you can't. Furthermore, if a pampered girl were to meet a man who had lost her heart outside, how could her family turn a blind eye to that man? But why do I feel that you haven't interacted with her family? This means that Miss Min stopped her family from looking for you to avoid causing trouble for you. Chapter 549. Sun Yilin rubbed his aching temples. He didn't know about these things, but it was indeed very likely to have happened. It was indeed extraordinary for a girl from an aristocratic family to be able to express her admiration, and it required great courage. When he was in the capital there were many girls who liked him. Their expressions were all obscure and reserved, and they were always full of tricks to please him. However, sometimes they were nondescript and annoying, and some of them were as clingy as Li Ruyu. Although Min Xiaoyuan ran to the capital with him, in fact he didn't meet Min Xiaoyuan many times. She didn't give people the impression that she was clingy. Even if she knew what he liked, she wouldn't pretend to know if she didn't know. Instead, she would share some interesting things with him. Sun Yilin had to admit that every time he met her, although the time was short, it was actually pleasant. After returning to the capital, it wasn't that he never went out. Thanks to his brother, his current image was very recognizable. Occasionally he would meet girls who used to admire him, and their eyes would be filled with obvious disgust. Also, because he was no longer a member of Ding General Manor, they would deliberately mock and ridicule him with the people around him, as if the fact that they used to like him was a lifelong shame. Of course, he happened to meet such a reaction, but it didn't mean that all girls were like this. From this point of view, Sun Yilin was actually quite unlucky. Min Xiaoyuan wasn't like that. When they first met, she didn't know his identity. Later on, she didn't change at all. In order to reject her, he told her clearly after he was adopted. Min Xiaoyuan said, I like you, not your family background. It doesn't matter if you are the son of Duke Ding's mansion or not. And when she knew that he had an accident, she rushed over immediately. She didn't dislike him but only felt distressed. He didn't care about himself or his health, but she was worried and sad. Sun Yilin had a good impression of Min Xiaoyuan, but to him this was all he could do. He couldn't go any further. Sun Yilin also knew that Min Xiaoyuan was a good girl. If she hadn't met him, she might have married the husband her parents chose for her step by step and had children. She might not have a vigorous life, but she might have a plain happiness. Because he had met her, his life might have changed beyond recognition. Sun Yilin had never thought of accepting Min Xiaoyuan, so his attitude had always been very clear. However, this girl was also very stubborn. She had a feeling of, it's your business if you don't accept me, but it's my business if I like you. After all, she was a girl. He couldn't be rough with her, right? Moreover, she also abided by etiquette and rules and would not go overboard. Therefore, Sun Yilin had no choice but to let her be and never pay attention to her matters. But now, some things had been clearly pointed out by his little sister. Originally, he hadn't forced Min Xiaoyuan to do this, so he couldn't be blamed for ignoring it. However, it was obvious that he couldn't be indifferent. Sun Yilin was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Many people revolved around him. No matter what others did, he didn't feel anything. The only thing he felt guilty about was probably his own mother. Duchess Ding fell ill at the beginning because of him. However, because the relationship between mother and son was too stiff at that time, he only wanted to stay away from that family. The guilt were suppressed in the bottom of his heart. When his mother passed away, he didn't get to see her for the last time. The emotions that were suppressed in the bottom of his heart finally burst out. But in essence, Sun Yilin still didn't regret it. Now there seemed to be one more person who made him feel guilty. What kind of Sun Yijia did Sun Yilin want to see the most? Of course, he wanted to let go of Sister Wan, marry a lovely wife and give birth to a lovely child. Not to mention wealth and glory, at least he would be happy and healthy. He couldn't let go of Jingwan's first awakening of love. Other women, no matter if they were good-looking or talented, couldn't move him at all. Even if they did something stupid for him, he might even ridicule them in his heart. Now Min Xiaoyuan appeared, at least it made him hesitate. Sun Yijia felt that there was hope, so she was willing to help him at an appropriate time. More importantly, it could only depend on their fate and luck. This time I'll take her with me when I leave the capital. I'll send her home directly and explain it to her family in person. I'm sure that after understanding my situation, her family will definitely be reluctant to let her suffer with me. Sun Yijia's anger, which had calmed down, flared up again because of Sun Yilin's words. At this moment she didn't say anything and directly left. She could do whatever she wanted. She really didn't care. Brother-in-law, why do you have to do this? Luo Jingbo was helpless. Think about it carefully. I'll go and see Yijia. He patted Sun Yilin's shoulder and chased after Sun Yijia. Luo Jingbo was now in the Hanlin Academy. There weren't many things to do, but there were many people who came to curry favor with him. Even when they met Muxiu, they couldn't stop. He felt that it was quite hard for him. Luo Jingbo saw Sun Yijia sulking and pulling the leaves of the flowers. Don't pull. Be careful not to prick your hand. The flowers had thorns. You men are all bad, Sun Yijia said angrily. Luo Jingbo was dumbfounded. What was this about? Besides, his brother-in-law was doing it for the good of Miss Min. How did he become a bad person? What do you mean? Please enlighten me. You probably still think that fifth brother is doing it for the good of Miss Min, right? Sun Yijia's voice was cold. His wife was really becoming more and more upright. She was becoming more and more intimate and reasonable. She used to be such an arrogant person and the model of a noble lady. Now the shadow of this noble lady was fading. In a few more years, who knew what she would become? However, this was also very good, wasn't it? Min Xiaoyuan, who had left the Luo family, originally wanted to shamelessly stay at Sun Yilin's place. However, she was not thick-skinned enough. Now she was a little annoyed. Why did she run away after being provoked by him? Wasn't he just trying to drive her away? He let her have her way so easily. It was even more inappropriate for her to go back now. However, it was her first time in the capital, so she naturally had to take a good look around. At least she could barely comfort herself that she was disappointed and pleased at the same time. Min Xiaoyuan didn't bring many people, but she still had enough money. After all, she was the daughter of a noble family. Due to her habit, she naturally wouldn't go to places where ordinary people frequented. This woman's exuberant desire to shop existed in every era, and Min Xiaoyuan was one of them. Coincidentally, Jingwan was also shopping these days. She was purely out for a walk, not to buy anything. Of course, if she saw something that interested her, she would buy it. The carriage followed behind her, and if she was tired, she would sit in the carriage for a while. Because she didn't want to disturb the people, she used a normal carriage. The curtains on both sides of the carriage were hung up. She sat in the carriage with Li Hongyuan and talked about the more interesting people and things along the way. Miss Min. Yuan, is that Miss Min? The one who was with Pei Xiuying in Jiangnan? Li Hongyuan looked in the direction Jingwan pointed at and narrowed his eyes slightly. Probably. Li Hongyuan's people had almost finished investigating Sun Yilan's incident in Jiangnan. Of course, he knew about Min Xiaoyuan. However, Li Hongyuan didn't find out what he really wanted to know. Sun Yilan was injured in a big fire, but that was before he returned to the capital. It wasn't the reason for his change in temperament at all. Some of his previous experiences seemed to be relatively normal. This result was not what Li Hongyuan wanted, but it was within his expectations. Even people who were watched day and night would have things that others didn't know, let alone investigate a person's experience in the past 2 to 3 years when no one was watching. There were only a few thin pages in the message, but if the experience of 2 to 3 years was written down in great detail, it could probably be written into a magnificent masterpiece. A few pages and a book thicker than a brick. Any difference between a few pages and a book that was thicker than a brick could be the reason for the unforeseen event. It didn't matter if they couldn't find out. Sun Yilan would be watched in the future. Send someone to take a look. Is it her? Because of the close relationship between Madame Min and Madame Pei, although there were still many officials, they were still restricted. There were no members of the Min family in the capital. Min Xiaoyuan was still dressed as a girl, which obviously ruled out the possibility of her coming to the capital with her husband. Therefore, Min Xiaoyuan's appearance in the capital was a little strange. As for Madame Min now, she wanted to walk out of Madame Pei's influence and return to the imperial court, so she sent someone to the capital to mediate. However, Madame Min had already submitted to Li Hongyuan and was Li Hongyuan's spy in Jiangnan. When Li Hongyuan ascended the throne, they would naturally have the opportunity to enter the imperial court. Although she didn't hear what the servant said, she brought the person over. It was obviously the person she knew. Jingwan got off the carriage. Min Xiaoyuan was also quite surprised to see Jingwan. The last time they met was more than 2 years ago. At that time she was 15 and the other was 16. Compared to now, there was a big change. Jingwan's eyesight was very good to be able to recognize her by accident. To be honest, Jingwan only knew that her surname was Min and didn't remember her name. Greetings, Your Highness. No need to be so polite. Miss Min, did you come to the capital with your elders to play? Jingwan smiled. Min Xiaoyuan was a little embarrassed. She really couldn't say that she ran thousands of miles with a man. If she didn't do it well, she would be mistaken as eloping. Although she was going all out for Sun Yilan and some people thought that she had lost face when she did this, but in this unfamiliar place she still wanted to save some face for herself. Even if it wasn't for herself, it was for Sun Yilan. She also knew about Sun Yilan's current situation. She had been in the capital for 3 days, and she had been understanding Sun Yilan's situation. If there was another elopement, it would only make the other party's situation worse. "No, there's something," Min Xiaoyuan said vaguely. Jingwan nodded understandingly and didn't ask any more questions. Then they chatted casually for a while. Jingwan asked about Min Yuhan's recent situation. She found out that Min Yuhan was doing well. Jingwan actually felt a little regretful. For the imperial noble consort, she might be more willing to see Min Yuhan than Lu Qingdi. Of course, there were some situations where it was better not to see each other. It had been 20 or 30 years and they had almost forgotten each other. Suddenly seeing each other again might be tearing open the wounds of the past. They weren't very familiar with each other, so they quickly parted ways. Jingwan looked at Min Xiaoyuan's back as she walked away. She's 18 and still not married? I don't see any traces of mourning on her body. Does she have a hidden illness or did something happen? Wan, are you that curious? If you want to know, you can get someone to investigate. Even if you're curious, you don't have to know. This is her private matter. Jingwan waved her hand and walked into a nearby shop. As a result, Jingwan missed the opportunity to know something. Min Xiaoyuan was in a good mood. Meeting someone she knew in an unfamiliar place was a bit like meeting an old friend in a foreign land. The bad mood caused by Sun Yilan's attack was a lot better. Hence Min Xiaoyuan started to shop. She accidentally bought too much and forgot that she wasn't in Jiangnan. She couldn't carry the things and was a little embarrassed. "Mama, why didn't you remind me? I saw that you were happy. Besides, it's not much. You don't have to worry about it. I don't want to buy any more. Let's go back." Min Xiaoyuan reached out to take something, wanting to share the burden. "Miss, this is not something you should take. I've told you many times. You obviously can't take it anymore. It doesn't matter if I take something less expensive. Give it to me. It's okay." Min Xiaoyuan thought of something and a blush appeared on her face. She lowered her volume. "Yilan's situation isn't very good now. When I get married to him in the future, I can't always be surrounded by people. I'll just take it as familiarizing myself with him. When the time comes, it might be just me and him shopping together." He felt happy just thinking about that scene. The mama sighed. Silly girl. Nothing was set in stone yet and she was thinking so far ahead. With Sun Yilan's attitude, even if he persevered, who knew how long it would take? However, when she thought of what her miss had done for Sun Yilan, she couldn't bear to pour cold water on her. She was really afraid that she wouldn't get what she wanted in the end and what would become of her. His anger towards Sun Yilan was equal to how much his heart ached for his Mississippi. Sun Yilan was already in his current state, yet his miss still didn't change her heart. It was already his great fortune that his miss still dared to speak ill of his Mississippi. Even if he knew his true motive, it was still unforgivable. In fact, if Sun Yilan readily accepted it now, this nanny would definitely be unhappy. Her miss likes you. Who are you to deserve it? Speak, did you seduce my miss? You're asking for a beating. What, you say you don't like my miss? Bastard, my miss is loved by everyone. How dare you not like my miss? You're asking for a beating. The mood of protecting the calf, was so subtle. The people sent by Sun Yijia followed Min Xiaoyuan all the way. When they returned, they reported to Sun Yijia. Sun Yijia was too lazy to listen and directly sent them to Sun Yilan. No matter how much she cared, it was useless, so why bother? Sun Yilan listened patiently and carefully. Only when he heard that Min Xiaoyuan had interacted with Jingwan, his expression changed slightly. In fact, Sun Yilan had heard Min Xiaoyuan say that she had interacted with Jin Qinwang Fei before. This was also a kind of fate. Sun Yilan didn't have any opinion about Min Xiaoyuan buying some unrealistic things. He might be short on money now, but he didn't put money in his eyes. When he was rich, he spent more. When he was poor, he spent less. It was just that. He wouldn't think that other people shouldn't spend money recklessly because of his own conditions. Only at the end, when he heard that Min Xiaoyuan and the others had gone to the medicine shop, his brows slightly furrowed. Go and ask who among them is sick? He suddenly felt a little worried because when he thought about the time Min Xiaoyuan entered the capital, it seemed that it was much later than him. The servant girl who went to ask was also astute. She didn't look for Min Xiaoyuan but the people around her. After all, if that Miss Min was sick, then for some reason she might not tell the truth, but the people around her were different. The person who was sick was indeed Min Xiaoyuan. She fell sick on the way to the capital, vomiting and having diarrhea. They were originally rushing, but in the end they were delayed for more than 10 days. On the third day it was the most serious and she almost lost her life. Until now she still hadn't recovered. The reason why they traveled while sick was to see Sun Yilan earlier. Sun Yilan couldn't stay any longer and directly went to the inn where they were staying. Min Xiaoyuan was bored to death and was thinking about what excuse to use to see Sun Yilan again. In the end, Sun Yilan himself came to find her. This made her extremely happy, her eyes sparkling. Yilan, you're here. She wouldn't ask why he was looking for her. If there was nothing, he could look for her. Sun Yilan sized her up. He didn't notice before that her face didn't change much, but her figure had at least 2 shadows. As expected, she had suffered greatly. At this moment he couldn't bring himself to reprimand her. Pack your things and come stay with me at the Luo residence. It was convenient to find a doctor to take a good look at her. Min Xiaoyuan's eyes brightened even more. Wait for me for a while. Seeing her so happy, Sun Yilan rubbed his temples again. Obviously things had exceeded his expectations. He had originally planned to leave tomorrow, but now he had to postpone it. At least he had to wait for her illness to recover before he could set off. The Luo residence had another guest, so naturally no one had any objections. Old Madame Luo nodded, keeping her opinions to herself. The Luo residence's doctor took Min Xiaoyuan's pulse and looked at the prescription used previously. There were no changes. However, when Min Xiaoyuan found out that Sun Yilin knew that she was sick and allowed her to stay at the Luo residence, she originally thought that he was starting to accept her. Her happy mood dropped a few degrees. Yuan, think about it this way. My fifth brother is also like this because he cares about you. Fifth brother is actually very cold. It's not easy to get him to care about you. Sun Yijia smiled. Really? Min Xiaoyuan instantly became happy again. Chapter 550. Sun Yijia comforted Min Xiaoyuan and saw that she was happy and carefree. To be honest, at this moment she hoped that she could get what she wanted. However, this matter was not up to them to decide. In the end, it still depended on Sun Yilin's thoughts. In Sun Yijia's opinion, even if there was another person in one's heart, it would not prevent them from getting married. Although it might be a little unfair to Min Xiaoyuan, how many congenial couples could there be in the world? She believed that even if Min Xiaoyuan knew about her brother's situation, she would still be willing. The feeling of liking someone and wanting to be with that person might not be obvious before she married her husband. Although she was moved at that time, it was not very obvious. However, after they got married, their feelings grew stronger day by day. She understood that as long as she was with the person she loved, even if it was just sitting quietly, she would feel happy. Therefore, she believed that even if Min Xiaoyuan's heart was sour, she would still be willing. After they got married, they would become the closest person. After a long time, it might not be impossible for the clouds to part and the moon to see the moon. She was afraid that her brother would be stubborn and would not be willing to get married for the rest of his life. However, Sun Yijia also knew that if her brother really thought it through so easily, perhaps he would not be like this now. Some people looked very transparent and could see everything clearly. However, once it became an obsession, it might be harder to forget and harder to let go than anyone else. Although Min Xiaoyuan was temporarily staying with the Luo family, she basically did not see Sun Yilin. Sun Yilin was deliberately avoiding her. His reason was very clear. Men and women were different. Min Xiaoyuan could not do anything. Moreover, she was in someone else's house. If she did something inappropriate and affected the family's integrity, she would become a sinner. Therefore, she did not insist on looking for Sun Yilin. Instead, she spent more time with Sun Yijia. She wanted to know more about Sun Yilin's past from this sister-in-law. Sun Yijia did not hide anything. He told her a lot of things, big and small. She even bluntly revealed some embarrassing things about Sun Yilin when he was young. Min Xiaoyuan laughed uncontrollably. He has always been a gentleman. Sometimes I even wonder if he deliberately put on a poker face when he was young like an adult. I didn't expect him to be so naughty. After laughing, she felt a little longing. Why didn't they get to know each other earlier? If only they had known each other earlier. Fifth brother used to play with me when we were young. At that time I felt that I liked fifth brother the most. However, as I slowly grew older, fifth brother became more and more dull and boring. Sun Yijia talked nonsense without blushing or skipping a beat. She was very restrained by her mother when she was young. She had to learn everything. When she could not walk properly, the rules were already carved into her bones. In the eyes of the elders, she was chaste and virtuous. In the eyes of the other little people, she was the real dull and boring one. Now she had the nerve to frame everything on her brother. She was just certain that Min Xiaoyuan would not go to her brother to verify it. Besides, even if her brother found out, she did not care. What could he do to her? When it came to her brother, even if she did not have anyone to support her, she was still very confident. She then talked about Sun Yilin's preferences. Compared with those antiques, calligraphy and paintings, fifth brother's favorite is flowers and plants. When he was still in Ding General Manor, his courtyard was full of all kinds of precious flowers and plants. The layout was also very good. It was really beautiful, especially when the 4 famous peonies gathered together. When they bloomed, they were especially beautiful. I could take anything in his courtyard no matter what it was, but I was not allowed to touch those flowers and plants. I remember one time when I deliberately broke a flower of his, but in the end he fell out with me and even slapped my palm fiercely despite my begging for mercy. He even slapped me hard. Although she was talking about it casually for Min Xiaoyuan to hear, these things also evoked beautiful memories of Sun Yijia. At that time she felt that Ding General Manor was beautiful. Now there was nothing in that place that she was nostalgic about. When Sun Yijia came back to her senses from her memories, she saw that Min Xiaoyuan was a little dazed. She was completely devoid of the joy from before. Puzzled, she asked, "What's wrong with Yuan Yuan?" Min Xiaoyuan looked at Sun Yijia as if she was about to cry. "When we were in Jiangnan, I once gave him a pot of clivia. I felt that it was very compatible with him and he would like it. However, he rejected it very clearly. He said that he did not like flowers and plants. At that time his expression was not fake and I believed it without a doubt." Sun Yijia frowned slightly. To be honest, she really did not know about this. After all, when she got married, her fifth brother had not encountered any misfortune. In fact, there were still some precious flowers and plants that had not been recorded in her dowry. Her fifth brother had repeatedly reminded her to take good care of them. After that, a lot of things happened. However, Sun Yijia and Sun Yilan had very little contact. She really did not know when he started to dislike the things that he used to like the most. Sun Yijia wondered if it was because of Sister Wan. Sister Wan also liked flowers and plants. Moreover, she was very proficient in this aspect. She always raised better flowers and plants than others. She also knew a lot of methods that others did not know. However, it did not seem right to think this way. As the saying goes, love a house, love its crow. Since he could not let go of it in his heart, he should like the things that they both liked more. It could also be a way to express his lovesickness. Or was it because it was too painful to look at things and think of her, so what the eye did not see, the heart did not grieve over? Maybe he doesn't like it now. People like different things as they age. That's very normal. It's just that after I got married I rarely saw him, so I don't know. You don't have to take it to heart. Sun Yijia pretended not to care and said, "Is that really the case?" Min Xiaoyuan asked uncertainly. Min Xiaoyuan was just a little more open-minded. She did not like to fuss over many things, but it did not mean that she was stupid. Moreover, she was always particularly sensitive to the people she liked. Therefore, Min Xiaoyuan actually faintly sensed that Sun Yilan might have someone in his heart. It was also because of this that he was still unwilling to accept her. Of course. Sun Yijia nodded very affirmatively. However, she was a little nervous. She felt that this matter must not be known to Min Xiaoyuan. She always felt that if she knew, this stubborn girl who refused to let go might give up. When there was no one in her heart, she could summon up the courage to pursue. However, if the other party was clearly in love with someone else and still refused to give up, then she would really be belittling herself. Everyone had their own pride. As for those who came from aristocratic families, their education philosophy was superior to others. Although it didn't mean that they looked down on ordinary people, it was just that they had stronger pride and self-esteem. Min Xiaoyuan was already at her limit by sticking to Sun Yilan because she liked him too much. However, there were some things that could not be hidden forever. Therefore Min Xiaoyuan would know about it sooner or later. However, Sun Yijia was clear that it was not now. She would not know from her mouth. It should be when there was room for reconciliation between them, and let that good brother of his tell Min Xiaoyuan personally. At that time her brother should have also let go. At least, there would no longer be a demon in his heart that would cut off all possibilities in the future. Sun Yijia felt that they should create time and space for them to cultivate their feelings. Obviously, Luo family was not a good place. It was better to let them leave the capital as soon as possible. When the time came, no matter how much they avoided, they would still have a chance to meet. Knowing the reason for Sun Yilan's delay in leaving, she had an idea. Turning around, she sent someone to Jin Wangfu to invite the Jin Wangfu's physician over to take her pulse. She felt a little uncomfortable. When Jingwan found out that Sun Yijia wanted to invite Gong Jiu to the Luo family, she was shocked. He also changed the dosage of 2 herbs. One of them was increased and the other was decreased. Then he wrote a new prescription. "Take this prescription. You will be cured by tomorrow. Then continue to take it for 2 more days. This prescription is for recuperation. You will be fine after taking about 3 prescriptions. The other thing is for food." Gong Jiu briefly mentioned some taboos. Min Xiaoyuan's mammy received the prescription like it was a treasure and thanked Gong Jiu profusely. Gong Jiu's words were indifferent and calm, but few doctors dared to say that it would take a long time to see the effect of the medicine, and it would take a long time to recover from the illness. He didn't think much about it, but others could feel his strong confidence when they heard it. People who came from the prince's mansion were confident because of their strength, not because of their conceit. So even if he was young, they didn't dare to look down on him. Gong Jiu replied with a few words and returned to the prince's mansion to report to Jingwan. Gong Jiu was no longer a hidden guard. He put all his attention on art and research. Because he had met Min Xiaoyuan in Jiangnan, hidden guards had a special ability to remember people, so he knew Min Xiaoyuan's identity at once. But now the things outside had nothing to do with him, so he didn't know her relationship with Sun Yilan. He just reported it to Jingwan. Min Xiaoyuan, who should have nothing to do with the Luo family and Sun Yijia, lived in the Luo family. Sun Yijia even made an exception to invite Gong Jiu over. How could Jingwan not feel strange? She could not ignore other people, but since it was related to the Luo family, she could not ignore it. Naturally, she sent people to find out the truth. At this time, Sun Yilan also knew what his sister had done. Facing Sun Yijia, he remained silent. Sun Yijia was furious when she saw him like this. What was worse was that she could not read his emotions at all. Naturally, she could not guess what he was thinking. Fifth brother, we know what you're thinking. There are some things that I can't be bothered to say to you. Anyway, as long as you can think clearly even if I don't say anything. If you can't or don't want to think clearly, then it's useless for me to say anything more. Therefore, you better take care of yourself. You can leave the capital in 2 days. It's quite annoying to see you like this. I'm pregnant now and can't see you. So, I don't have to worry about you. Sun Yilan looked at Sun Yijia. After a while, he said softly, little sister, there are some things that can't be changed. Okay, I'll listen to you. I'll leave the capital with Miss Min in 2 days and send her home. Take care of yourself. Without saying anything else, he got up and left. Sun Yijia frowned. She felt that there was a hidden meaning in her fifth brother's words. She felt a little uneasy. Jingwan soon found out what she wanted to know. After a moment of surprise, she was quite happy. Because the information given to her was flat and straightforward and expressed the matter clearly, it led to a point where she could associate the information with the relationship between the characters based on the literal information. Therefore, in Jingwan's eyes, Sun Yilan had finally let go of her and found his true love. Of course, she was happy to see this. Sun Yilan was young and promising. It couldn't be better if he didn't hang on to her. As for her husband, he didn't have to be jealous. It was really good for everyone. Then Jingwan reflected on her reaction. When she saw him at Ding General Duke's mansion last time, she seemed to have overreacted. He had known Miss Min for a long time and had already let go of her at that time. She thought too highly of herself. When they met again in the future, they could naturally greet each other. However, Jingwan neglected one point. If they really liked each other, why didn't Sun Yilan and Min Xiaoyuan get married? However, even if she thought about it, she probably thought that there must be obstacles because of the gap between their status. Jingwan happily shared the new news with Li Hongyuan. She almost told Li Hongyuan clearly that he didn't have to be jealous in the future. Li Hongyuan smiled, but there was a little unfathomable in the depths of his eyes with a little coldness and indifference. He touched Jingwan's face and thought that his wife was getting more and more silly. There's another one. Hey, don't make trouble for no reason. Jingwan glared at him unhappily. Qin Jingmin was now about to be a father. Of course, it was definitely not Li Ruyu who was pregnant. It was one of his concubines who had wanted to climb into his bed in the first branch of the Qin family, Madame Luo's elder brother. Now she finally got what she wanted. In fact, Li Ruyu's situation had not been good. Li Ruyu had lost the title of Commandery Princess, and Commandery Prince Cheng's mansion was getting worse and worse. Qin Jingmin had already graduated from the Hanlin Academy. Taking advantage of the shortage of people in the Ministry of Revenue, he directly climbed to the 5th rank of the secondary class. Logically speaking, it was not a problem for him to directly divorce Li Ruyu. In fact, it was easy to find a reason, but he didn't. Obviously, Qin Jingmin was now not as simple as before. Li Ruyu ruined his marriage, so he wanted Li Ruyu to stay in hell for the rest of her life and live a life worse than death. In the end, Qin Jingmin and Sun Yilan were different. He was the hope of the family, the pillar of the family. He had the mission of carrying on the family line. He could not bear to let the elders sigh all day long and his mother and grandmother wipe their tears from time to time. There was no news about the assassin, and Lu Qingdi's temper became worse and worse. Thinking about it, because he could not find out anything, he was very insecure in the palace now. Not only was Yu Zhongqing, who had not recovered from his injury, punished by Lu Qingdi, but Li Xiyan also did not get off easy. It should be known that Li Xiyan had never made a mistake before. This time she was also severely punished, which made people more or less nervous. However, half a month later, Li Hongyuan received news that the people who were watching Sun Yilin had lost him. Yes, together with Min Xiaoyuan, Li Hongyuan's people had completely lost track of him. Chapter 551. Li Hongyuan's expression was unfriendly. Sun Yilin and Min Xiaoyuan were the only ones who had disappeared. Sun Yilin's servant and Min Xiaoyuan's men were still under his control. At this time he was no longer secretly watching them. He directly interrogated the remaining people. It turned out that when Min Xiaoyuan knew that Sun Yilin was going to send her home, she had a big fight with Sun Yilin. She even said that she had been kicked out of the family and had nothing to do with the Min family. Actually, it was only on the surface. Her parents still loved her. At least they had never mistreated her in terms of money. Sun Yilin's face darkened for a few days. Min Xiaoyuan seemed to be in a cold war with him, but she never left. Then one morning he woke up and found that Sun Yilin and Min Xiaoyuan were gone. No one knew where they went. The person in charge of watching them said that they met another group of people on the night of their disappearance. The other group's purpose was very clear. They were trying to delay them and create an opportunity for the other group. Sun Yilin's change was a little unusual. As expected, he should be killed directly. Li Hongyuan looked at the map. The place where Sun Yilin disappeared was a county city that extended in all directions. Therefore, there were many ways to leave, which meant that there were many places to go. Without knowing the identity of the people who helped him behind the scenes, it could be said that it was a very difficult thing to predict his movements. After that, Li Hongyuan directly issued a kill order to his men everywhere. They did not have to look for him deliberately. If they saw him, they were to kill him on the spot. Whoever completed the task would be rewarded handsomely. Li Hongyuan wanted Sun Yilin dead, not only because of Jingwan. In his previous life he had seen Sun Yilin's talent and knew that Sun Yilin was not an ordinary person. Moreover, Sun Yilin's experience was very different from his previous life. A person who grew up with the flow of the world and a person who grew up with changes could make very different decisions. If Sun Yilin's previous life cared about the world, it was hard to say if Sun Yilin's current life. It was not impossible for Sun Yilin to join the enemy country and destroy Qiyuan. Even Li Hongyuan himself did not care much about Qiyuan. Although Sun Yijia was still Sun Yilin's burden, she was not his weakness. He had the ability to help other countries destroy Qiyuan. Then it would be a piece of cake for him to protect Sun Yijia and some people in Ding general manner. No one in power would be too stingy with a meritorious person. Sun Yijia was Jingwan's sister-in-law. Li Hongyuan would not do anything to her. Therefore Sun Yilin was fearless. Sun Yilin knew a little about Li Hongyuan's affairs. When no one knew about it at first, it might be difficult to notice what Li Hongyuan was doing behind the scenes. However, once there was clear news, someone would spend a lot of effort to investigate Li Hongyuan's affairs. Then a lot of things would come to the surface little by little. Whether it was external or internal, Li Hongyuan would be completely exposed soon. Now Sun Yilin was very likely to be the person who would reveal the news. Li Hongyuan was expressionless. This day would come sooner or later. Anyway, it was almost time. So what if it was exposed now? What Li Hongyuan could not tolerate the most was that if Sun Yilin really chose such a path, then there was no doubt that one of the benefits involved would be Jingwan. The memory of his previous life was useless for what was going to happen next because many things had changed beyond recognition. However, when Li Hongyuan did things, the memory of his previous life was only a reference. If he relied on it all, how could it be called a change, let alone defying the heavens and changing his fate? Next, he would rely on his own ability to have a good fight. He would let him see if Sun Yilin, the pillar of the country in his previous life, who was known as the youngest cabinet elder and was praised by many people, had the ability to overturn him. It should be known that even without the advantage of being a prophet, Li Hongyuan still had a good hand. After all, he had planned for so long. How could Sun Yilin have all these? Sun Yilin probably relied on his brain. If he wanted to compete with him, he could only rely on the power of other countries. Moreover, in Li Hongyuan's view, it was far from enough if he only borrowed from one country. However, once more than one country was involved, it meant that there would be a struggle for benefits between countries. No one liked to share the delicious fat meat equally. Everyone wanted to monopolize it. It was even more difficult to obtain the right to speak with one's own strength. Whether it was to become a chess piece and be discarded after the end, or to become a chess player, this was a very important matter. Li Hongyuan was inexplicably excited. It could only be said that after his rebirth, although he had to control his temper in all kinds of ways, everything else could be said to be smooth sailing. There were no opponents, so he more or less felt a little lonely at the top. In his previous life he could make a comeback in such a desperate situation. How could he lose in this life when the overall situation was under control? If he really lost, Li Hongyuan would accept it. At that time he would just have to take Jingwan to the underworld with him. He could lose anything, and it was not that he could not afford to lose. However, he absolutely could not let go of Jingwan. It was only when it came to Jingwan that he would not lose to anyone. Li Hongyuan estimated that the people below would coincidentally encounter Sun Yilin, and the probability of Sun Yilin being so unlucky as to walk into the knife's edge was very low. Therefore, Li Hongyuan was more likely to wait for Sun Yilin to make a move. Now he only needed to wait for Sun Yilin to make a move. Jingwan felt that her husband seemed to be a little strange recently. It was as if he was faintly in a state of excitement. Every time she asked, Li Hongyuan would always say that it was nothing. When Jingwan asked anxiously, Li Hongyuan said that some things might be coming to an end. However, more specifically, Li Hongyuan was unwilling to say more. Jingwan only thought that he was preparing to take the initiative to make a move, to end this struggle for the throne in Qiyuan. Even if he didn't ascend to the throne right now, he had to confirm his position as the number one. Jingwan also knew that her current situation was special. Not only could she not be of help, but she might even be a burden. Therefore, she did not ask any more questions. She focused on taking care of her baby in peace and did what a pregnant woman should do. However, after waiting for a long time, it was already October. Her belly was already showing a little. Jingwan did not see any movement from him. He did not seem to be any different from before. Jingwan was puzzled. What exactly was he up to? What he didn't know was that Li Hongyuan was also waiting. It was just that according to the situation reported by his subordinates, there was indeed someone investigating him. However, there were all kinds of signs that seemed to indicate that it was no longer a big deal after reaching a certain point. What the other party wanted was not his specific strength, but a general understanding, or perhaps just a confirmation. Li Hongyuan even waited for someone to report this matter to his good father, the emperor. However, in the end nothing happened. Even some of his plans and arrangements did not happen. This was really a little puzzling. Or could it be that his guess was wrong? The person who helped Sun Yilin was actually someone in Qiyuan, or even someone who was controlling the overall situation from somewhere in the capital. This possibility was really not big. However, Li Hongyuan still increased his control over the capital. Once again he conducted a thorough investigation. If someone was plotted against under his nose, then Li Hongyuan could slap himself a few times. After this investigation he really found some small fish and shrimps. Now it was obvious that there was no need to keep these small fish and shrimps. They were all found out and directly crushed to death. However, there was still a little accident. There was a very important clue that was broken. It was not someone else but Yao Rao. At that time, because Prince Kong sent someone to Li Hongyuan, Jingwan directly went to the door. The person who suffered directly was the woman who was the brain of Prince Kong. However, this woman Yao Rao should not be underestimated. Her intelligence was outstanding and she had a good disguise skill. In a situation of certain death, she escaped like a cicada and hid. Li Hongyuan's people found her real body. However, because it was clear that Yao Rao was a spy and Li Hongyuan knew her identity, he kept her. At the critical moment she might be able to be used. However, he originally thought that this person had always been under control. This time he found that he did not know when the person changed. This person was just a person wearing a two-layer mask. An heir knelt down and asked for forgiveness. This was indeed their dereliction of duty. It was fine if the person slipped away, but they did not know when the person slipped away. This could not be forgiven. However, now was not the time to settle the score. Yao Rao was originally a person of southern Qi. Originally she had both talent and emotion, and she was also born with good looks. She was pursued by many young talents. Such a woman, if nothing unexpected happened, should have had a good future. However, the bad thing was that she was a concubine's daughter of the Marquis. This kind of her was naturally a thorn in the eyes of her official mother and her sisters, an existence that absolutely could not be tolerated. There was no need to think about what would happen next. She was persecuted again. When she was forced into a desperate situation, she had the ability to elope with a young master who was very fond of her. In the end, the other party went back on their word, tangling with a large group of people who saw her as a joke. They ridiculed her, saying that she was a toad who wanted to eat swan meat. Pursuing her was only for fun. After all, other than her birth, everything else was just barely acceptable. She was not worthy of being the official wife. Yarao almost died. By chance she was saved, and the person who saved her was the younger brother of the Emperor of Southern Qi. He was an ambitious man who was eyeing the throne covetously. This Prince of Southern Qi was a person who would do anything to achieve his goals. He had trained many spies, and among these spies the majority were beautiful women. As a man, he knew very well that a beautiful woman could often accomplish things that many men could not easily accomplish. Clearly, the completely black-hearted Yao Rao wanted revenge. She wanted to slaughter all those who had humiliated her and become the leader of these spies. There was one thing that was not quite the same as the others. That was, not only did she want revenge, she also wanted power. She wanted to become a person above others, she wanted to treat those men as playthings. And that ambitious prince also had a treacherous temperament. He promised Yao Rao that after everything was done, he would make her a marquis. When Yao Rao came to Qi Yuan, it was obvious that she held the line of communication with Southern Qi. A lot of things depended on her, whether it was sending out information or receiving orders from Southern Qi. But Yao Rao was only one of the people of the ambitious prince. Things like going deep into the enemy's country was something that the emperor should do. He had not yet obtained the power. How could he send people to other countries to jump around? In fact, in Li Hongyuan's previous life he only met her when he attacked Southern Qi. She had always shone in Southern Qi. She had appeared in front of Li Hongyuan. To put it bluntly, it was a honey trap. However, at that time, Li Hongyuan was at most a beast in human skin. How could she expect him to have protective feelings for the fairer sex? Now he did not know whether Yao Rao had left Qi Yuan's capital, or if she had changed her identity and continued to hide somewhere else. The capital was so big. If she really hid silently, it would not be easy to find her. However, not easy did not mean that it was impossible, because even if she hid among ordinary people, she was not an ordinary person. And if she wanted to obtain important information, she could not hide in ordinary people's homes. The range of possibilities was narrowed down. He also spent some time to set up tight surveillance. As long as the other party made a move, it was basically impossible to escape. However, because many people had died during this time, it could be considered as beating the grass to scare the snake. The remaining spies would not easily make a move again. However, Li Hongyuan's subordinates did not let down their guard because of this. Just because they did not spread the news did not mean that there was no news coming in. In the end, in just a few days, a clue appeared. However, this clue was very obscure, and for a while they could not figure out what was going on. Li Hongyuan put the summary of matters on the desk, spread it out, and looked down with his hands behind his back. After half a night of pondering, Li Hongyuan finally grasped the end of the thread, and bit by bit he found the answer he wanted. The corner of Li Hongyuan's mouth raised into a cold smile. This arrangement is really deep. It's been more than 10 or 20 years. Li Hongyuan did not make a move for the time being. He first asked someone to get a portrait, and then the next night he went to the Ruan family. Wan Ruizhong knew that Li Hongyuan would come in person under such circumstances, and it was definitely not a small matter. Wan Ruizhong was sincerely for the country and the people, but his eyesight was not very good in the past, and he trusted a woman who cuckolded him and was a spy. Fortunately, after the feces on his eyes were wiped clean, he was not affected too much. I wonder if Prince has something important to tell this old official to come in the middle of the night? Wan Ruizhong stood respectfully. Where is Madame Wei? Li Hongyuan went straight to the point. Madame Wei was naturally the second wife who cuckolded Wan Ruizhong and had an affair with his son. She was Wan Fengfei's mother. Madame Wei's methods were good and she had good martial arts skills. However, after some things were exposed, Li Hongyuan still kept her, only crippling her martial arts. He also had Juan Ruizhong guard her closely. This old official will have someone bring her here. Madame Wei was originally very charming, but now she had been worn out and aged beyond her years. However, this woman's endurance was very good and she still maintained her sobriety. When she saw Li Hongyuan, her eyes flashed with surprise and fear. But then she laughed. Jin Wangye is very courageous. With the current situation, to dare to enter the Ruan residence at night, it seems that everything is ready. Then I wish Prince success. Her voice was rough and hoarse, without the slightest bit of the original charm. Li Hongyuan looked at her indifferently, obviously not having the desire to speak. Then an heir directly stepped forward and unfolded the paper in his hand. It was a portrait. No one spoke. Li Hongyuan only paid attention to her expression. His pupils shrunk slightly, but this was enough. It seems that you do know each other. Tell me everything you know and Ben Wang will give you a quick death. Hearing this, Madame Wei knew that there was no room for her to quibble. When one's life was worse than death, a quick death was an extravagant hope. Madame Wei's heart was obviously struggling. What, do you still have concerns in your heart? This prince kept you alive because I originally thought that you were the leader of the spies planted in Chiyuan, but it turns out that you are just a small pawn. Then the real leader of your group would definitely know about your situation. Before you were discovered by this prince, you could still be used as a cover. Now you are just a completely useless pawn. Let me ask you, the people you are worried about or the people you care about, if they no longer have any value in restricting you, will they be released or will they be killed? Weisher closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, there wasn't the slightest bit of emotion. Jin Wangye, I have to admit that you are indeed very capable. Those brothers of yours have been kept in the dark until now, not knowing who their real opponents are, but it is not entirely their problem. It's just that you can control the Qi Yuan in your hands, but what about the outside? You must know that there is always someone better than you. Are you sure that you will have the last laugh? Whether I can have the last laugh or not, it will naturally be revealed when the time comes. Madame Wei was surprised. She thought that a person like Li Hongyuan, who had the power and could play everyone in the palm of his hand, and he was still so young, logically he should be very conceited. But it was not the case at all. He may not have put some people in his eyes, but he did not underestimate his opponents. He was cautious, serious, and did not become complacent even when he had the advantage. He was obviously just a young man. How did he do it? He became the final winner, so Madame Wei would not find it strange. If such a person lost, it could only be said that he did something that angered the heavens and the people, and the whole world was against him. But the fact was, Juan Ruizhong, who was called by the Qi Yuan as the mainstay of the neutral faction, was working for him. Originally, I thought that I had already thought highly of you, but it turned out that I still underestimated you. Now it seems that Feng Fei's taste was very good. She picked someone that others did not think highly of at first glance. Unfortunately, she did not have the slightest good impression of your highness. Perhaps this is my fault as a mother. I did not teach her well. If I taught her like a normal lady, perhaps the result would be completely different. A normal lady wouldn't take a fancy to this prince. That's right. With your highness's reputation, a normal lady would indeed avoid you. Madame Wei seemed a little regretful. Your highness, I can tell you everything that you want to know. In the end, perhaps she was relieved. Madame Wei appeared unprecedentedly calm. Although her voice was unpleasant to hear, she spoke neither quickly nor slowly. She stood naturally, showing the grace of a noble lady. Because it was relatively concise, it only took about 7 or 8 minutes to finish talking. Before Li Hongyuan left with his people, he gave Madame Wei a pill to take. Tomorrow the Ruan family could hold the funeral for their mistress. After all, Madame Wei had originally used illness as an excuse to recuperate at home. Now that she had passed away, it was not strange. As Li Hongyuan walked, he thought about Madame Wei's words. Decades ago, Southern Qi had the ambition to be like every other country. Their plans had begun at that time. They had sent out a large number of spies. Although most of them had been cleaned up, a small number had taken root. The matter of sending out spies had never stopped. From the very beginning, there were some who had already taken root in other countries for 3 generations. As long as these people were not exposed, no one would believe they were spies. Among the people planted in Qiyuan, she had originally only held an upper-middle position. but because she had married Juan Ruiz Hong and Juan Ruiz Hong had become a cabinet elder and trusted her greatly, she had easily obtained a lot of information. She had become the head of the intelligence gathering in Qiyuan. That's right, she was only collecting information. The most important part of the orders from Southern Qi was not in her hands. It was the person that Li Hongyuan had recently unearthed, the Marquis of Chongping. That invisible person in Chongping's manor, who had been set up as a puppet to shield his beloved concubine. Who would have thought that she would be such a person? Li Hongyuan wanted to say that compared to these women, compared to the women in the palace, his wife was like a little white rabbit, harmless, soft and kind. Chapter 552. For the time being, Li Hongyuan was still analyzing more things in his mind, not to mention his own wife. The Marquis of Chongping was the second wife of the Marquis of Chongping and was actually a sister of Madame Wei. The two of them were both Madame Wei, and the second wife of the Marquis of Chongping had probably died a long time ago. Their corpses had been tossed to some unknown place. If the person who killed them still had some conscience, perhaps they would have buried them carelessly. If not, then the corpses would probably have been gnawed to the bone by wild dogs. The Marquis of Chongping was once one of the 4 dukes and 9 marquises, originating from the Cui clan. The Cui clan was also a large aristocratic clan and had developed well. However, the Marquis of Chongping's residence had long declined. If not for the Cui clan supporting it from behind, it would probably have been completely destroyed. The current Marquis of Chongping might not be known to outsiders, but the people in the clan knew very well that he was a complete muddlehead. He had no ability and did not improve. He thought that he was infallible. Other than the empty title of Marquis of Chongping, he did not have any real position. Yet he still blamed the heavens and earth, finding excuses for him to indulge in a life of debauchery. He did not listen to anyone's advice and stubbornly insisted on doing things his own way. He had long disappointed the entire clan and favored his concubines while neglecting his wife, causing the Marquis of Chongping's residence to be in a foul mood. The position of Marquis was bestowed by the great ancestor to the branch of the Cui clan that had helped him the most. Furthermore, it was clearly stated that only the direct descendants could inherit the title. Even the heirs could not inherit it. Otherwise, the Marquis of Chongping would have long been taken away by the other members of the Cui clan. A marquis was still of great use to an aristocratic clan. If it was managed well, it could bring endless benefits. Thus, no matter how useless the Marquis of Chongping was, he could not be allowed to lose his Marquis of Chongping. Of course, from the perspective of the entire clan's interests, this Marquis would either be very capable and could hold up half the sky by himself and lead the entire clan to a better future, or he would be obedient and become a puppet. As long as he was in the hands of his clansmen, he would be neither superior nor inferior. The degree of unlikability of him would be second only to the current Marquis of Chongping. How's the investigation of Marquis Chongping's estate going? Replying to Master, the Cui clan originally wanted to support Marquis Chongping's eldest son to the throne. However, this person has been suppressed too harshly since he was young. Originally, he was somewhat intelligent, but he didn't learn anything that he should learn. Now he is extremely mediocre. Speaking of which, he does meet the standards of the rest of the Cui clan. However, Marquis Chongping wholeheartedly wanted to give the throne to the second son of his beloved concubine. Master, do you remember that a few years ago when you were at the Summer Palace, there was a situation at the literary meeting right before you left? Li Hongyuan thought for a while. He still remembered some of it. What's wrong? At that time, Master once said that Marquis Chongping didn't fix the curtains and favored his concubine while neglecting his wife. He replaced his concubine with his wife and wanted Marquis Chongping to be replaced by someone else. However, before they returned to the capital, Marquis Chongping ruthlessly acted, causing his eldest son to have a problem and become a cripple. The only person who could sit on Marquis Chongping's position was the second son. Thus, this matter was left unsettled. Speaking up to here, an heir was somewhat apprehensive. This was because this matter didn't seem to have been reported to Master. It wasn't that he intentionally concealed it and didn't report it. Rather, if Master knew about it, he probably wouldn't intentionally change anything. In addition, he had other matters to attend to, so he accidentally forgot about this matter. However, in the end, it was their negligence. In any case, he was the descendant of one of the country's founding heroes. Marquis Chongping's trivial matter hadn't reached the level of stripping him of his title. In addition, the Cui clan's people had dealt with him in many ways. As a result, the current Marquis Chongping was still that scum. Li Hongyuan indeed didn't have any recollection of this matter. After thinking about it, he more or less understood what had happened. It had been so long, so he couldn't be bothered to look into it. The people by his side knew that they had made mistakes. They also knew in their hearts that there was no need to punish them severely every time. The way of governing should occasionally have a limit to tension and relaxation. Li Hongyuan thought of how the eldest son of Marquis Chongping had violently beaten up the concubine he thought was his biological sister, who had actually replaced his younger brother's position. His words at that time to him had unknowingly supported him. However, in reality, it had only caused him to sink deeper into the mire. He had accumulated 10 to 20 years of resentment. At that time he probably even hated Li Hongyuan. Li Hongyuan had never cared whether others hated him or not. In any case, the number of people who hated him was already in the sea. However, people who harbored such hatred in their hearts were often able to do things that exceeded expectations. If he was the second wife of Marquis Chongping, then he would obviously make good use of this person. Carefully investigate the eldest son of Marquis Chongping, including his wife, his wife's family, and even the people of the Cui family. The more detailed, the better. Don't let go of any clues. Yes, master. In reality, it was clearly a little too late to investigate now. However, since there was a possibility, he naturally couldn't let it go. It was just like the spies from decades ago who had even developed into a family. Could it be that because they had already sent out so much information that they couldn't salvage it, they decided to ignore it? What kind of joke was this? As the saying goes, it's never too late to mend the pen after a sheep is lost. When Li Hongyuan returned, Jingwan was awake. However, she didn't make any noise, so the servant girls guarding outside didn't know. Without a familiar scent by her side, she couldn't sleep well. She could only open her eyes in the darkness. When she heard noises outside, she hugged the quilt and sat up. As the curtain of the door was lifted, a faint light followed in. When he got closer, Li Hongyuan could more or less discern Jingwan's state from her breathing. He simply reached out and lifted the cover of the night pearl embedded in the bedside. As expected, he met Jingwan's clear and bright eyes. Have you been awake for a long time? Li Hongyuan reached out and touched her hand. It wasn't cold. Nope. Yuan, you've been very busy recently. Jingwan simply stated a fact. I'll try not to go out at night. If I go out, I'll come back as soon as possible. It's not that serious. I'm more sleepy now. In fact, I think that if we sleep separately for a few days, I can be like before. Each of us has a big bed and we can turn around as we want. Anyway, you're busy. Why don't we just sleep separately? Jingwan suggested quite sincerely. Wanwan, do you know what state your husband was in before we got married? Light sleep, easy to wake up, and many dreams. What do you think is the difference between this state and the person who sleeps with you every day? Li Hongyuan said quite plainly. Jingwan was startled. To be honest, after getting used to this man, she also slept very well. Even if she rarely woke up at night, and when she woke up, he basically woke up with her. However, whether a person slept well at night could be completely reflected by a person's mental state. This man was obviously full of vitality and his body was very good. Was this a state that he couldn't sleep well at night? Wanwan, if you don't have me, you can get used to it in a few days. However, without you, your husband can't get used to it at all. So, are you sure you want to sleep separately from me? So I have no objections. After all, my wife's request is the most important. However, without me by your side, you still have to take it easy. What if you turn around and press on your stomach? It doesn't matter if this little bastard is gone, but if you have a miscarriage, you'll also suffer. Jingwan saw that he went from acting pitiful to another strange style as if nothing had happened. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What nonsense are you talking about? How can you curse your own son like this? You're also so careless when you're acting pitiful. But forget it. We've always been willful and overbearing living kings of hell. It's rare for us to destroy our own image. I'll reluctantly continue to give you half of this bed. Although that was what he said, Jingwan knew very well that he wasn't lying. She couldn't help but feel sorry for him. Li Hongyuan didn't comment. He reached out and put his hand on Jingwan's slightly protruding belly. How do you know it's a son? What if it's a daughter? Didn't you say it's that little bastard? He took advantage of every opportunity to come into this world no matter what. The timing is so accurate. If it's not him, who else could it be? Li Hongyuan said coldly. If it's really him, then it's you who gave him the opportunity. Every time they talked about this, they would quarrel a little. In fact, many times Jingwan felt that he didn't mean what he said. She despised him in all kinds of ways, but she still hoped that it was that child. Yes, I gave him the opportunity, so now I regret it. I want to strangle him to death. What should I do? The possibility of it not being him is higher. Aren't you implicating the innocent? Jingwan reached out, got up, and directly wrapped her arms around his neck. Li Hongyuan carefully dragged her body. Don't you want to strangle him to death too? Jingwan kissed him on the lips and then stuck close to him. It's very tiring to give birth to a child. If you really do it, then wouldn't I have worked hard for nothing? Yuan, do you have the heart to do that? After saying that, she directly kissed him. The tip of her tongue easily slid open Li Hongyuan's lips and knocked open his teeth. It was the most direct and deepest contact. Although his wife was tempting him because of the unborn little bastard, Li Hongyuan didn't stand on ceremony and accepted it. It had already been the first 3 months, so some taboos had been lifted again. Of course, although the taboos were lifted, the frequency would definitely be greatly reduced, and basically it would only be done once. This time the interval was still very long. For the king of hell, it wasn't even enough to fill the gaps between his teeth. It was just an appetizer, and it was completely not enough to fill his stomach. Rather than this, he often felt that it was better not to eat. However, the appetizer could at least satisfy his appetite. If he didn't eat, then he would really be completely hungry. So, it was said that it would be a waste not to eat when there was an opportunity. Jingwan also only found out after the taboos were lifted. It seemed that after pregnancy the body became more sensitive, so it was easier to obtain a sense of pleasure. It was more or less forcing a certain someone to drive fast. Obviously, a certain someone's face was even darker. Therefore, in order to make this man remember less of the unborn baby, Jingwan could only use other methods to serve him. It could be said that everything that she hadn't done before was done. It could be said that it was an unprecedented initiative, and the level of embarrassment was off the charts. However, as the saying goes, the first time is unfamiliar, the second time is familiar, the third time is familiar, and the third time is familiar, and the third time is nothing. Jingwan persevered and served a certain someone twice tonight, and then directly fell down. He was tired. And a certain someone who had eaten his fill, hugged Jingwan and kissed her sweaty temples. He asked someone to prepare water, washed up, and then hugged her to sleep. When she woke up the next day, a certain someone was gone again. Jingwan wasn't very surprised. Because the time used for morning exercises in the past was used for sleeping, so when Jingwan got up it was already quite late. However, after only 3 months, Jingwan's exercise volume was also increasing. Everyone's physical condition was different, so the amount of exercise was definitely different. Jingwan moved as much as possible within her tolerance range, and even occasionally belly danced. Of course, she didn't shake her belly wildly. The people around her were a little frightened, but Jingwan felt good and there was no discomfort. In this case, in less than 4 months, Jingwan felt the fetal movement for the first time, and it was relatively obvious. Jingwan was surprised at first and a little nervous, and then she was full of joy. Nanny, Nanny, the baby is moving in my belly. Jingwan immediately shared with Nanny Gong, who was giving her a massage. Nanny Gong was also surprised, and then carefully reached out to put her hand on Jingwan's belly. Under her palm she could clearly feel it. Nanny Gong had seen pregnant women before. When Sun Yijia was pregnant, she helped to take care of her, but this was the first time she felt such a close touch. Moreover, Jingwan's baby was definitely different from other people's, so she was happy and nervous, and then hurriedly took Jingwan's pulse. Her pulse showed that everything was fine. Even so, Nanny Gong was still worried and asked someone to call Gong Jiu over for another diagnosis. Other people who knew about this matter didn't think that Nanny Gong's method was inappropriate. Chapter 553. After Jingwan calmed down, she even put this matter to the back of her mind. When Li Hongyuan came back, she didn't even want to share this matter with him. In the end, it was the people around her who couldn't help but interrupt. Speaking of which, everyone had more or less seen pregnant women, whether it was early or late, but some people never paid attention to it. Li Hongyuan was naturally one of them. So, regardless of whether he liked the child in Jingwan's stomach or not at this time, he was still a little curious. Just like some silly fathers, he wanted to lie on his wife's stomach and listen to the child's movements. Of course, he wouldn't go to that extent. He couldn't help but reach out and touch Jingwan's stomach carefully. Obviously, he also wanted to feel it, but there was no movement. Unwilling to give up, he touched it again. Other than feeling a slight bulge in her stomach, he didn't feel anything else. Jingwan thought to herself, "Silly baby, your father doesn't like you to begin with. Now that he wants you to make a move, why don't you take the opportunity to please him? If you're really the boy in his memory, you should do something." Then Jingwan's stomach really moved, and it was quite obvious. Li Hongyuan's eyes flashed with obvious surprise. How should he put it? Felt very strange. There was also a trace of gentleness on his face that he didn't even notice. After all, this was his blood after all. He didn't have a good impression of the child because before the child was born, Jingwan had to suffer. After the child was born, it would distract Jingwan. As for the inheritance of the bloodline, it was actually an instinct. Jingwan beamed with joy. She felt that her baby and her heart were connected. As for the possibility that it was a coincidence, she didn't want to admit it. However, her smile didn't last long. After seeing her expression, the gentleness on Li Hongyuan's face disappeared without a trace. It was as if it had never appeared. Jingwan naturally didn't find it funny. She sighed in her heart. Nothing could last more than 3 seconds. One is that happy? Although he did not like the little bastard in her belly, if she was really happy, it was not impossible for him to endure it. A good mood was also very important for a pregnant woman. These debts could be placed on the little bastard's head. After the baby was born, he could slowly settle the score. Wasn't it natural for a father to take care of his son? He didn't find anything wrong with going against Lu Qingdi. The double standards were too obvious. Jingwan didn't hide her good mood because this man's tolerance towards her was still increasing. He said that he would record every debt in a small notebook, but in reality, how could he really settle the debt with her in the future? The so-called settling of debts was just some shameful things, and under normal circumstances, it wasn't uncommon. Moreover, no matter how ruthless he was, it was just like that. At most, he would be a little exhausted and he would be fine after some rest. It wasn't a big deal. Sure enough, after she nodded, Li Hongyuan didn't say much. In the following 2 days, Li Hongyuan stayed in the residence as if he had nothing better to do. He accompanied Jingwan to take care of the flowers and plants. Under normal circumstances, in this short period of time, Marquis Chongping's wife wouldn't know that something had happened to Madame Wei. However, there were always accidents. For example, if something happened and she suddenly contacted, then she would definitely find out that something was wrong. Taking advantage of this time difference, then Li Hongyuan should be able to take advantage of this opportunity to wipe out all those people. Of course, even if there wasn't this time difference, it didn't matter. As long as he took down the leader, then the small fish and shrimps below were nothing to be afraid of. They would just spread the news about Li Hongyuan's situation. In reality, Li Hongyuan didn't think that his true situation was as secretive as before. In these 2 days, his subordinates investigated the situation of Marquis Chongping's eldest son. Just as Li Hongyuan had predicted, this person had already been taken in by the Marquis of Chongping's wife. From his actions, it could be seen that he was truly filled with hatred. Towards the Marquis of Chongping, towards everyone else in the Marquis of Chongping's household, towards the Cui clan, because it did not involve Li Hongyuan, his attitude towards Li Hongyuan could not be seen. However, to collude with the enemy and betray the country, he did it without hesitation. From this, it could be seen that he no longer had the slightest bit of attachment to the entire Qiyuan. Although this person looked like a cripple, but in any case his surname was Cui. Although there was no possibility of him taking the position of Marquis Chongping, he was still a good method for the Cui clan to control Marquis Chongping. As long as he cooperated with the Cui clan to prove that Marquis Chongping was unkind as a father, Marquis Chongping would compromise if he wanted to keep his title. In this way, the other clansmen of the Cui clan, even if they were pretending, would appropriately show goodwill towards this eldest son of Marquis Chongping. And once they had a target, this person wouldn't be as mediocre and incompetent as he looked. This caused the clansmen of the Cui clan to feel pity for him. Gradually, the relationship between the two sides became closer. He would always be able to obtain some useful information. When the bits and pieces were gathered, they definitely couldn't be underestimated. According to the situation, if there were no accidents, Yao Rao should be by this person's side. Who knew how long it had been? With such a woman around, the information obtained would at least double. Close the net. Li Hongyuan gave these 2 words and didn't ask any more questions. He only left the city that night and went to the manor. This was the first time Li Hongyuan met Marquis Chongping's wife. No matter what, this woman looked calm and serene. She didn't seem like a prisoner at all. She ate vegetarian and recited Buddhist scriptures in the Marquis's residence all year round. It seemed that she had really distanced herself from the secular world and was tainted with a Buddhist nature. Chapter 554. Li Hongyuan only exchanged a glance with the Marquis of Chongping's second madam. He looked at her expressionlessly for a moment, then left without saying a word. From the Marquis of Chongping's second madam's attitude, it could be seen that before Li Hongyuan arrived, Li Hongyuan's subordinates did not interrogate her. Obviously, the King of Hell was going to interrogate her personally, but after seeing her he changed his mind. Interrogate her. If you can get anything out of her, then interrogate her. If you can't, then deal with her. Obviously, Li Hongyuan knew this kind of woman very well. She would either tell him everything or she wouldn't say anything, no matter what cruel methods were used. Women were weak and needed to rely on men to survive. However, some women could be stronger and more determined than men, more ruthless than men, and could also play with men in the palm of their hands and use them as a stepping stone to climb up the social ladder. This kind of woman could appear on the surface, but she could also hide in the depths. Obviously, Li Hongyuan classified the Marquis of Chongping's second madam into this category. On the surface, the Marquis of Chongping's second madam was a puppet in the inner court. Due to illness, she didn't leave the house all year round and she ate vegetarian and prayed to Buddha. She had been in the Marquis of Chongping's household for 10 to 20 years, but she had never seen Li Hongyuan, at least not in close proximity. Even so, she was able to confirm Li Hongyuan's identity as soon as she saw him. Firstly, as the leader of the spies behind the scenes, she knew too many things that others didn't know about. Secondly, the King of Hell was too recognizable. Astonishment flashed across the Marquis of Chongping's second madam's eyes, but she seemed to accept this reality in the blink of an eye. She even lightly sighed with a hint of a smile, as if she felt that her loss wasn't unjust. Thinking about it, when she first began to infiltrate the Qiyuan in the capital, Li Hongyuan was just a child. According to the timeline, he hadn't even been reborn yet. He didn't know that there were so many spies in the capital, yet he was still able to quietly develop his power, avoiding his own people and those eyes. As the saying goes, the onlooker sees the game more clearly. The people around Li Hongyuan were used to his temperament, so to a certain extent, it was normal for them to not have any suspicions. However, as a spy, she had many subordinates and monitored the entire capital, yet she still couldn't clean up them. This was enough to show how powerful the King of Hell was. Therefore, for her to end up in this situation, she didn't feel any resentment, and was able to accept it well. However, from this, it could be seen that the second madam was different from Madame Wei. She was a spy, but she did things indifferently and calmly, as if she was eating and drinking normally. No matter if she failed or succeeded, or even when she dealt with those who didn't do their jobs well, she was still so calm. She had the same background as Madame Wei, and Madame Wei could mess around, but he still maintained his virginity. It must be said that with her ability, it would be too easy for her to have an affair behind the Marquis of Chongping's back, but she didn't. She also didn't have any special hobbies and seemed to have a good attitude. To be honest, to be able to do this, it was a little scary. This was probably the reason why Li Hongyuan wanted to personally interrogate this information, but after seeing it, it seemed to be beyond his expectations, so he decisively gave up. The second madam of Chongping looked in the direction Li Hongyuan left for a long time. As expected, there are new talents in every generation. She sighed softly, then smiled. However, until the last piece is played, who can be sure of who will win or lose? Perhaps, at the crucial moment, he will fall into the hands of an inconspicuous person or someone he trusts the most. Who knows? The second madam of Chongping looked at the sky outside. In fact, from her position, the scenery outside was very beautiful. Hearing the approaching footsteps outside, the second madam of Chongping closed her eyes with some regret. And this regret seemed to stem from the fact that she wouldn't be able to enjoy such beautiful scenery in the future. Slowly, the second Madam of Chongping's breathing became lighter and lighter, until it disappeared. However, her sitting posture remained unchanged and her expression didn't change either. It was as if she was trying to fall asleep. So when Li Hongyuan's men came in and got close, they discovered that the second Madam of Chongping was already dead. This was more or less unexpected because Gong Jie was also involved in this operation. First, he confirmed that the second Madam of Chongping's mouth wasn't poisoned, nor was she poisoned. But now she was dead. So he immediately reported to Li Hongyuan. Soon after, Gong Jie rushed over. With his current medical skills, it was rare for him to make a mistake. Of course, he couldn't guarantee that his diagnosis was 100% accurate, so he needed to confirm the cause of death of the second Madam of Chongping. As the saying goes, the dead should be respected, but there was no respect for a spy. So when Gong Jie couldn't determine the cause of death from the second Madam of Chongping's appearance, he directly stripped her naked, then used a knife to dissect her. To be honest, after Jingwan explained the suturing of external wounds, she jokingly mentioned dissecting her stomach. Gong Jie took note of it and was already putting it into practice. Not to mention dissecting a dead person, even if it was a living body, he could get quite a few. Now he was very familiar with human organs. Chapter 555. Because he knew a lot about the dead and the living as well as how they died, how long they had been dead, and what kind of state they would be in, even if he didn't know everything. However, Marquis Chongping's second wife was not within his scope of understanding. She was clearly a dead person, but after cutting open her corpse, she was just like a living person. Every cut was like a cut on a living person's body, regardless of whether it was the speed of bleeding or the shape of the wound. One must know that there was no heartbeat or pulse. How did she end up in such a state? No matter how one looked at it, it left one wondering. Even his usual coffin face could not help but frown at this moment. Of course, Gong Jie's psychological endurance was also rather strong. He did not believe that common sense did not exist. It only meant that he did not understand this aspect. His goal was to find out the cause of death of the Marquis Chongping's second wife, because dying in such an inexplicable manner was the most frightening part. However, Gong Jie still could not find the cause. Even after cutting open the flesh of the four limbs, the bones were basically all cracked open and even the head was completely open. Under normal circumstances, this kind of silent death should be caused by some kind of poison. However, Gong Jie used all the methods he could think of to check and it showed no abnormalities. It was as if a healthy person had suddenly stopped breathing. There was no disease, injury or poison. It was an inexplicable death. Gong Jie made the scene rather gory and terrifying, so much so that when others came to inquire and saw the scene, even if they were used to seeing all kinds of corpses and had experienced all kinds of situations, they still felt a little horrified. The gaze they used to look at Gong Jie with, even though they were once good brothers, now carried an inexplicable trace of reverence. Especially when Gong Jie faced the dismembered corpse with an expressionless face. It was as if compared to normal people they were not very normal, but compared to him they were as normal as they could be. Was this a kind of consolation? In reality, from Gong Jie's point of view, this scene was nothing much. To a certain extent, Gong Jie was actually a little fussy and pursued perfection. From the very beginning, perhaps it really was a mess, but now, whether it was the cut or the things taken from the corpse, they could all be said to be orderly. It was only because the death was abnormal that there was a little more blood. An heir led two people forward, doing his best to ignore the scene, and his attention fell on Gong Jie. "How is it?" Gong Jie didn't respond. He lowered his head and looked at every inch of the room, trying to see if he had overlooked anything. This continued until Gong Jie's gaze inadvertently landed on the brain that was spread open like a piece of paper. There seemed to be a slight change in it, but it also seemed like nothing had happened. A thought suddenly appeared in Gong Jie's mind, but it disappeared as quickly as it appeared. He couldn't find the source, but he did find the most important thing. "Quick, go get some incense ashes." The three of them looked at each other in dismay. Where would they get the incense ash in this manor? He didn't burn any incense at all. The manor next door has incense. If you don't have any, just burn it. "I don't need too much," Gong Jie said coldly. Clearly Gong Jie was the boss now. Because he wasn't sure if the Marquis of Chongping's second wife was dangerous, Gong Jiu wore special gloves from the very beginning. Because of these gloves, he wouldn't be affected when he came into contact with poison at any time. At this moment, he stretched out his hand and pushed in bit by bit from the edge of the thin paper, following the place where he felt the change had occurred. Because he couldn't see it, he could only rely on his senses and stop at a certain place. He felt something different. It was very subtle and could be overlooked if he didn't pay attention. Gong Jiu paused and even wanted to take off the gloves on his hand. Even if the gloves were very thin, it couldn't compare to the subtle feeling he could feel from his own skin. However, he didn't do so in the end. He relaxed his strength and was very gentle, wanting to swipe across the thing to see its shape. However, he didn't succeed. At this moment, Gong Jiu only felt that there was something under his fingers. Because it felt his existence, it was changing its shape according to his movements, allowing the thin paper to maintain its proper shape. Perhaps because he found the source, Gong Jiu wasn't in a hurry. He was very patient and relied on a very subtle feeling to confirm that the thing hadn't slipped away from his hands. That was enough. An air and the others moved quickly enough and didn't make Gong Jiu wait for too long. Gong Jiu's other hand picked up a small pinch of incense ash and sprinkled it under the fingers of his other hand. Then a certain thing revealed its true appearance. It was a worm. It was originally stuck to the brain, but because it was stained with the incense ash, it actually slowly swelled up. It was a fat worm that was half the length of a person. Gong Jiu picked it up. It was soft, but compared to before, the texture was very obvious. Chapter 556. Gong Jiu had only heard of such things by chance and had never come into contact with them. In reality, even if he did come into contact with them, it would be rather difficult, perhaps even impossible. He had only heard that their uses were unpredictable, their numbers were few, and it was not easy to raise them. They were something unique to a tribe called the Wani tribe, and their numbers were few. Because they did not marry into other tribes, their population had always been a big problem. To be able to maintain a population of over 1,000 people was already not easy. But even if their numbers were few, outsiders did not easily provoke them because of these Wani. And this Wani tribe was within the borders of southern Qi. As a superior, generally speaking, they would not allow such things that were difficult to control to exist. However, the location of the Wani tribe was unknown to outsiders. Just based on what little knowledge they had, there were all kinds of poisonous insects, snakes, and ants on the outskirts of the Wani tribe. Miasma overflowed everywhere, and it was basically unheard of to enter and then leave unscathed. So, even if Gong Jiu was interested in such an existence, in the end he would let it go. Now, he had actually come into contact with such a thing, even though Gong Jiu was not certain that this thing was a Wani. Then Gong Jiu took out a box from his medicine chest and put the Wani inside. Looking at the lid of the box, his eyes were obscure and unclear. Then Gong Jiu took the box to see Li Hongyuan. At this moment, Li Hongyuan was sitting in front of the enchanting woman. The enchanting woman's disguise was rather brilliant, but now she was slightly miserable. Because a layer of human skin mask had been torn off her face. Each layer was a different face. Logically speaking, for such a proud and conceited woman who believed her beauty to be unparalleled in the world, every face should be beautiful. However, this was not the case. Not only were there unremarkable faces, there were even old women. It was enough to show that she was not an ordinary person who could bend and stretch. Yao Rao was different from the second wife of the Marquis of Chongping. Perhaps she had been viciously hurt by a man before, so on the surface she was unbearably debauched. However, on the inside she actually treated men as playthings. She wanted to play with all the men in the palms of her hands, trample them under her feet, and make them become subjects under her skirt. What she enjoyed was the process of conquering them. She was different from Wei Shi of the Ruan Manor. After all, what she wanted was pure carnal desire. Therefore, when the second wife of the Marquis of Chongping saw Li Hongyuan, she could still smile peacefully and sigh. Seductive was all kinds of debauchery. It was truly seductive to the extreme. After all, when she first saw Li Hongyuan when she entered the capital, she had already developed feelings for him. In a situation like this, it usually wouldn't end well. However, if she could seduce him, there was still a chance of survival. However, it was clear that this method was completely useless in front of Li Hongyuan. As for the reason why he was still here, to a certain extent, it could be said that his mood wasn't too good. It was obvious that Sun Yilin didn't act according to his expectations. If it wasn't related to Jingwan, perhaps he would still be very patient. Clearly, because it was related to Jingwan, it was inevitable that his mood would be a little irritable. He had to find a place to vent. However, because Jingwan was pregnant, Li Hongyuan didn't want her to worry. Therefore he did his best to suppress his temper and not let it explode. Because once he completely vented, it would inevitably leave traces. As such, not to mention Yao Rao, even the people around him didn't notice his mood. However, the people around him, based on their experience or intuition, felt that something was wrong. They all tucked their tails between their legs and carefully buried their heads in their work. Only Yao Rao was doing her best to court disaster. Not to mention the teasing words being tied up, the movements of her limbs were not small. On the contrary, because of the rope, some places were even more obvious, appearing particularly seductive. However, Yao Rao was singing her one-man show energetically. However, the men present, not to mention the main character, the others also didn't bat an eyelid. After a long time, wouldn't it be awkward? Yao Rao was so angry that she even suspected that these men couldn't do it. Of course, there was also a faint fear in her heart. The more it was like this, the more likely it was for her to survive. She didn't want to die, not only because of her supreme ambition, but also because of her unavenged hatred. Because of a series of unforeseen events, it was clear who the initiator was. Yao Rao naturally couldn't treat Li Hongyuan as a flower vase. This man had deceived everyone. In fact, this kind of man made Yao Rao want to conquer him even more. Therefore, even if she knew that there would be a bad ending, she couldn't help but be excited. Everyone says that Jin Qinhuang has been through thousands of flowers. Could it be false? Yao Rao's gaze fell on a certain place on Li Hongyuan's body. She licked her lips, her eyes were like a seductive hook. Li Hongyuan was originally just sitting quietly with his legs crossed and his hands naturally placed on his lap. Suddenly he changed his sitting posture. Leaning forward slightly, he raised his hand and ran his fingertips over his eyebrows. Go, take off that face. Ben Wang wants to see if there is a human skin mask underneath. Yao Rao's true appearance, Li Hongyuan naturally had seen it before. Even if it was a long time ago when he saw it again, there would always be some impression. A person beside Li Hongyuan answered and calmly stepped forward. He reached out and traced a circle around Yao Rao's entire face. His fingers were a bit cold, making Yao Rao shiver for no reason and shrink back. Jin Qinhuangyi, it's not like you haven't seen Nujia before. Whether this face is real or not, you still don't know. You should also believe that the person beside you isn't. And the person in front of her took out a small knife and suddenly smiled. Whether there is more inside or not, take off this face and you will know. You're tuning in to the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.